Sharing. For 8, 6:15 അല്ലേ? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the INICET PSM Live by Medico. I'm Dr. Sunna, a PSM faculty on Medico. So, INICET exam is around the corner. My question is, how many of you are confident in attempting the PSM questions? So, like, you have all studied it, but still you are in some kind of doubt, right? So, this live is basically to clear all those doubts and make you confident in attempting the PSM questions. So, we have prepared the high yield questions from PSM, which are repeatedly asked in the INICET exam with some mnemonics and some clues on how to answer these questions. So let's start. Going on to the first question. You have a cohort of 100 children followed for 1 year to estimate the incidence of measles. So the question is basically to calculate the incidence. Okay. At baseline, 10 children already have a past history of measles. During follow-up, 20 children develop measles for the first time. What is the incidence of measles in this particular population? That's your question. So they've given you the population at risk and also how many children has developed measles. So what is the formula for incidence? So incidence is new cases, that is the total number of new cases divided by, is it the total population? No, it is the population at risk. So new cases by population at risk will give you the incidence. So in this particular question, the total number of new cases are 20, that has been given. 20 divided by the denominator, always remember for incidence, the denominator is new cases at risk. So you cannot take the total 100 here in the denominator. So because you have to minus the 10 who have already had past history, they are not at risk anymore. Similarly, if at all in this question they have given, say, the number of children vaccinated for measles, that also has to be subtracted from the denominator. Because when we are calculating incidence, the denominator should have only the people who are at risk. So here, people at risk to be 100 minus those who already got the infection. So it will be 20 by 90, which will be approximately, you will get an answer of 22.2%. So this is going to be the incidence of measles in this particular population. So before going into the next question, let's just discuss in brief what is incidence and prevalence. So incidence and prevalence, both these are the measures of what? Measures of morbidity. Morbidity means it can be any occurrence of an illness or a disease or any health-related event. Okay, that measure is what we mean by the measures of morbidity. Basically, we have two measures. One is the incidence and another one is the prevalence. So if you see the the jar on screen, you see, if you see this jar, the total water here, that is kind of representing the total cases in that particular population of any disease that you are learning, you're studying about. Okay, so that total cases is the prevalence of the disease. And when you're adding new water into it, the prevalence is increasing, right? So the new water or the new cases is the incidence. And when will this water in this jar decrease? Obviously, when the water is going up. So in case of a disease, it is either the patient is leaving this pool of the disease. That can be either the patient is getting cured of the disease or somebody dies of the disease. In any way, that the patient is not a part of this particular pool, that means the prevalence is going to decrease. So in this case, we can say that morbidity, measures of morbidity, basically we have two measures. One is your prevalence and another one is the incidence. Prevalence take into consideration what is the total number of cases. So it includes the old plus new cases of a particular disease. Incidence, on the other hand, it considers only the new cases. Okay. So what is the, we'll just write it in a table. We'll just tabulate it. So I'm writing here incidence. And then you have prevalence. So what is the numerator and what is the denominator? So in incidence, you have only the new cases, right? So it is the number of new cases which occur over a specific time period. That is the numerator for incidence. And what's the denominator? It is the population at risk. Whereas when you're considering prevalence actually measures the burden of the disease. All the forward. So prevalence will be all the case, and the old cases as well as the new cases. And the denominator is total population. There's nothing like population at risk. It is the total population. Now, what are the uses? See, incidence gives you the risk of developing a disease, okay? That you can get only in the incidence. That is the risk of developing a disease. And also it is used in etiological studies. Prevalence, on the other hand, I told you it gives you the total measure of all the cases. So that gives the burden. It gives the burden of the disease in a community. And only if you know the burden of a particular disease, you can plan health services accordingly. So this also, in a way, it helps to plan. It helps in the planning of health services. And which study design helps you find the incidence? We have the cohort study. So it is a cohort study which will help you to calculate the risk and the incidence because you are following up the people, right? Whereas prevalence you get from cross-sectional studies. They are also called as prevalence studies. So these are the basic differences between incidence and prevalence. And one more question I need to ask is, which one of the following, whether it is incidence or prevalence, which one is a rate and which one is a proportion? See, what is the difference between rate and proportion? Both rate and proportion, they have a numerator and a denominator. And usually the numerator is part of the denominator. But rate has a time component in it. And also the multiplier is usually, it is something other than 100. So it can be 1,000, 10,000 or whatever. Instance, usually we take the denominator, the multiplier as 1,000. But its proportion is actually a percentage. Okay. It is also again the numerator is part of the denominator, but the multiplier is always 100 in case of a proportion. Remember P for P. So prevalence is a percentage or a proportion. And incidence is always a rate. So these are the basic difference between incidence and prevalence. Now, another for INI-CET, an expected question can be, what do you mean by name and bias? We have talked about different types of bias in the whole class. So what is this? This is a name type of bias, which is called as name and bias, also called as the incidence prevalence or prevalence incidence bias. See, what do you mean by this? See, for example, if I want to study the relationship between alcohol leading to stroke. So my exposure here is alcohol and the disease here is stroke. So I want to see whether alcohol, intake of alcohol is increasing the burden of stroke in a community or something like that. So when I'm taking this study, when I'm doing the study, I will include as an outcome, I need people who are affected with stroke. Suppose stroke has a very high death rate. It has a high death rate anyway. So what happens is when I'm including the prevalence, I'm not including people who have died because of stroke, right? And people who have died because of the stroke. So those population, those who have passed away because of this particular disease that you are studying is being omitted when you are calculating. So when I'm measuring the association or what is the relationship between alcohol and stroke, I'm actually underestimating because I'm missing a whole chunk of people who have passed away because of the fatality of your disease. So this bias that can occur, which can lead to underestimation of your true association, because you are only measuring the prevalence. You are missing out people who have died. So that is called as a Neyman bias, also called as a prevalence incidence bias. Question, it is a type of selection bias. This is a kind of selection bias only, but it is a name type of selection bias. So question might be, what is Neyman bias related to? It is a prevalence incidence bias. And this occurs because, certain diseases have a short duration or some are rapidly fatal. So when you're assessing the prevalence or when you're assessing the burden of the disease and then commenting upon the relationship between the exposure and the outcome, you will get an underestimation. Okay, this is called as Neyman bias. Now we'll move on to the next question. So the second question is, in a population of 500 people, 20 new cases of a disease were reported over 2 years. Okay. And the total person time observed was 950 person years. Calculate the incidence rate of the disease. This is actually a very simple question, direct question. But if you know what you mean by incidence rate, what is this incidence and what is this incidence rate? See, incidence can be of two types. Okay. It can be either a cumulative incidence or an incidence rate. Both are kind of two types of incidence when we do the calculations. Here they are asking about incidence rate. So what is incidence rate? Incidence rate is got by the formula total number of new cases, whether it is incidence rate or density, whatever. The numerator is always total number of new cases divided by, here you have total person time. Okay, instead of the total population at risk, you have something new which is called as the person time. Why is this important? We usually calculate incidence, I told you, in which studies? Cohort studies. Okay. Cohort studies are studies which involve a long-term follow-up. So we recruit some participants in the study, or we have an exposed and an unexposed group, and we follow them up for a long period of time. And then we assess for the outcome, right? But what happens is sometimes people will not continue in your study. There is a lot of attrition in the study. People will be lost to follow up. So what happens is, out of your study participants, some people will continue in your study for say 10 years. Some people will continue in your study for 5 years. Some might drop out at 2 years. So people and their duration will differ. So when we just take a blanket denominator, just counting everyone, that doesn't account for the duration, right? So to involve the duration also into the measurement, we are using something called as the percent time. In that, we for each person, the duration during which they were there, they were part of your study is also being calculated. So that's why we have something called as the incidence rate. So again, remember the numerator is the new cases divided by it is the total person time. So in this question, they've already given you that the person time is 950 person years. So here you just have to, give the values and compute the answer. You don't have to calculate the person time. So here we'll first do the answer here. So here incidence rate is, how many new cases they have told you? New cases are how many? 20. So 20 new cases divided by 950% years. That's the percent time. So your answer would be around 0.02 if you do the calculation. Now we have to convert it into person years. Okay. Now the answer, the options have 100% years, 1000% years like that. So this is not coming. So we'll have to convert it into person years. So when you convert into per 100% years, you have to multiply this number with 100. You get it a number of 2.1. So here the answer would be option B, which is 2.1 per 100% years. That's how we are going to calculate the incidence rate. This was a previously asked question in the INI-CET. So this is what we were talking about. Morbidity, quickly. Prevalence is there, incidence is there. Prevalence is the existing cases. Incidence calculates only the new cases. Again, prevalence can be of two types. One is a point prevalence, which means you're measuring the prevalence at a particular point. That is, point prevalence would be, it's just like taking a snapshot. If I take a photo now and how many people are having that disease at that particular time, in that photo, if that's been captured, that gives you the point prevalence, or it is the existing cases at a point by the total population, population you're capturing, that is the denominator. So that is the point prevalence. Similarly, you have something called as the period prevalence. So it's in the name. Point prevalence is at a particular point. Period prevalence is, it's a during a period. So you have a particular period, say 1 week, 2 week, 1 month or whatever. So during that period, how many total cases exist? And how many people were being studied in that total period becomes the denominator. So period prevalence is existing. Period prevalence would be existing plus new cases which develop existing cases at the start of the period plus new cases which develop during your study period divided by the total population or average population at that period will give you the period prevalence. Now you have incidence also. Similarly, we have a cumulative incidence, which is also called as incidence proportion. Both are the same. Then you have the incidence rate or incidence density, which we just calculated. Okay. So cumulative incidence is your the simple incidence which we are usually calculating. That is your new cases by population at the start of your study. And incidence density, this is the one, or incidence rate or incidence density, both are the same, just different names of the same thing. This is the one which involves what? Total person time in the denominator. Numerator is always new cases. So these are the different measures of morbidity. Now, another question is, what is the relationship between incidence and prevalence? You have prevalence and incidence. So what is the relationship, mathematical relationship between incidence and prevalence? Remember PID for pelvic inflammatory diseases. Okay, that is the mnemonic here. So P equal to ID or I into D. Prevalence is incidence into duration. So this is the relationship between your prevalence and incidence. PID or P is equal to I into D. You get questions from this also. So mnemonic is PID or pelvic inflammatory disease, P equal to I into D. This is usually done when the disease is stable. For a stable disease, when the incidence and duration are kind of constant, there only you can actually apply this. Prevalence is equal to incidence into duration. Now, another set of questions that you can get is they'll give you a scenario. And the question would be, what would happen to the incidence? What would happen to the prevalence? Let's see some example. First one, suppose there is a good vaccine. Okay, somebody invents a new vaccine and the vaccine is very effective. So for a particular disease, a new vaccine was invented. Say for cervical cancer, we invented a new vaccine. Now the question would be, what will happen to the incidence of the disease, incidence of cervical cancer in the example that I told, and what will happen to the prevalence? Okay, so suppose there's a new vaccine. New vaccine means you are actually preventing what? New cases. So obviously your incidence has to decrease, right? And with the relation P equal to I into D, if my incidence is decreasing, what should also decrease? My prevalence is going to decrease. So in case of a new vaccine, once the incidence is decreasing, the prevalence is also going to decrease. That is one question. What will happen to the incidence and prevalence when there's any preventive thing which is going to reduce the number of new cases? Second example can be, what happens in case of finding a disease, finding a treatment which will improve the survival. Okay, but it won't cure. For example, let's take the case of HIV, AIDS. Previously, if you get AIDS, you were like your life was actually would be short because we did not have very good drugs at that time initially to prolong the life of a patient with AIDS. But now even HIV/AIDS has become just like a chronic disease, like your hypertension, diabetes. People or patients with people living with HIV, they live for a longer time because we have very good treatment, we have medicines, but they are patients of HIV. Okay, they are not getting cured of the disease, but their longevity is increasing. They are having a better survival. In such a case, so when there is a new drug, which will improve the survival, which will increase the longevity of life of the patients, but it is not going to cure the disease. Now, what happens to the prevalence? See, in this case, your incidence is not going to change. Okay, because we are not targeting the new cases. The drug is going to treat people who are already having the disease. But here, you remember P equal to I into D. In such a case, the duration is increasing, right? The patient living with this particular disease, the duration of his life is increasing, or the duration of the disease is also increasing. So if the duration is increasing, obviously my prevalence will also increase. So when you have a treatment which does not cure the disease, but it improves the life of the people, or it keeps the disease under control, in that case, your prevalence is increasing because the duration is going to increase. So that is another example. So we'll move on to the next question here. So the next question is, it's again a favorite question for INI-CET. We'll see this. A study that a study shows that exercise reduces the incidence of cardiovascular diseases. However, people who exercise also tend to have what? Also tend to have a healthier diet, and good diet itself lowers the risk of cardiovascular diseases. Okay. In this context, diet acts as a what? Options are confounder, effect modifier, mediator, or an independent variable. See, in this case, you are dealing with three variables here. What are they trying to learn? So basically, every study, most of the studies or majority of the studies, we have an exposure, we have an outcome, right? So we try to find out the relationship between the exposure and the outcome, whether this exposure is increasing the risk of the outcome or whether it is protective. Likewise. So here you have exercise as the exposure. They have told that exercise, a study has been conducted, and exercise reduces the incidence of what? Cardiovascular diseases. So your exposure is what? Exercise. And yeah, outcome is incidence of cardiovascular diseases. So there comes your two variables. Okay, exposure variable and the outcome variable. Now they're talking about a third variable. What is that? People who exercise also tend to have a healthier diet, and diet itself lowers the risk of cardiovascular diseases. So here we are talking about a third variable here, which is a healthier diet. So when there's a healthier diet, people who exercise tend to take a healthier diet. You agree with me? Yes. So exercise and healthy diet are related, right? And obviously, if you are taking a healthier diet, you are going to decrease the chance of developing a heart disease or a cardiovascular disease. So your diet is also related to your heart disease. Yes. So what is this third variable we are talking about? It is what you call as a confounder. Okay. So the answer here is confounder. So what is a confounder? We will see. See, confounder is a third variable, or you can say a mix-up variable. Okay, so you have a exposure, you have an outcome. So here comes a third variable, which plays in this particular relationship between exposure and outcome, and it can either create a false association, or it can exaggerate an already existing association. Okay, so suppose there is a exposure and an outcome, and when there is a confounder, when this third variable confounder comes, what happens is it creates a false association. Actually, there was no association between the exposure and the outcome, but a confounder comes into play and it creates a false association. So such a variable is called a confounder. Now we have something called as an effect modifier. Effect modifier is kind of similar to your confounder, but it is not the same. They are not the same. Effect modifier also is a third, unwanted guest we have. He's the third variable that comes to play. And but what happens is effect modifier does not create a false association. It just modifies the already existing effect. That's why it's called as the effect modifier. Okay. So there is a relationship between the exposure and an outcome. There is an association. When there's an effect modifier, it just either it increases the association or it exaggerates the association or it kind of decreases the association. But it does not have the power to create a association which was already not there. So that is effect modifier. And the rest of the options, mediator and independent variable doesn't come here into play. So you will get confused with confounder and effect modifier. Now let's see what are the three factors of a confounder or criteria to call a variable as a confounder. See here, this is the example we told. You have an exposure, you have an outcome, and you have a confounder. To call a variable as a confounder, we have to follow, the variable has to agree to three criteria. The first one is the confounder or this third variable must be an independent risk factor for the outcome. Okay, that is the first thing. Your confounder should be an independent risk factor for the outcome. Okay, that is even without the exposure, your confounder itself should be able to cause this particular outcome. That's the first criteria. Second criteria, the confounder should be associated with the exposure also. So it is associated with the outcome or it is an independent risk for the outcome is the first criteria. Second one, it is independently associated with the exposure. Third criteria is that the confounder should not come in the causal pathway. This is the causal pathway between your exposure and your outcome, right? So confounder, the third variable or the confounder, should not come in this particular pathway. It is outside. Okay, it should not come in the causal pathway. So these three criteria are needed to say that our variable is a confounder. Now, when you consider our example in the particular question, You had exercise as the exposure, you had outcome as lower risk of cardiovascular diseases, and the confounder was healthy diet. Now think about the criteria that I just told you. See, confounder is associated or it can independently result in this particular outcome. Yes, right. Second one, confounder is associated with the exposure also. And third point, it is not coming in this particular pathway. It has its own pathway. It doesn't have to come here. Okay. So these three criteria have been met here. So here your answer would be the option confounder would be the best answer for that particular question. So I'll just write down the three criteria that we just discussed. The three criteria to call a variable or call the third variable as a confounder. First one is should be an independent risk factor of outcome or for the outcome. Second one should be associated with your exposure. And the third point is that it should not come in the causal pathway. Now, this table shows the difference between the confounder and effect modifier. I'll just zoom it. So what is a confounder? It is a third factor, a nuisance factor that distorts the true association and it creates a spurious association. Okay. Whereas the effect modifier, it is a biological phenomenon that just modifies the magnitude of the effect. It is not going to create a spurious association, but it just magnifies or it just modifies the magnitude of the effect. And in any study, when we are doing a study, we don't want both of them. Okay. But mainly our goal is to eliminate the or control the effect of confounder because it creates a spurious association. But effect or modifiers, to an extent, we cannot remove them completely. Okay, because I told you they are biological phenomena in most cases. So what we can do is we have to identify them, and while interpreting the result of our study, we have to keep in mind, see, there is an effect modifier. The result might be because of that. And how do you see whether this is a confounder or an effect modifier? You have to do what you call as stratification. So stratification is a statistical procedure whereby you can actually analyze the relationship between the exposure and outcome with respect to different strata of the variable. So when you do stratification, your confounder, the association that occurred, if it was due to confounder, it disappears completely. So once you do a stratification and the association you got initially, it just vanishes away. That means the association that you got is because of your confounder. Okay. But when you do stratification, but the association is still present, but it has a different magnitude. Either it will increase in the magnitude or it will decrease in the magnitude. In that case, what happens is this is due to your effect modifier. Okay, it is not because of the confounder. Okay. So that is how you can differentiate whether we are dealing with a confounder or a effect modifier. Now move on to the next question here. Hill criteria for causality. All of the following are part of Hill's criteria for causality, except your options are sensitivity, temporality, biological plausibility, dose response relationship. What is the answer here? So here the answer is sensitivity. What is the just the criteria which comes in Dole-Hill relationship? Which is similar to sensitivity in name. It is actually specificity. Okay, the answer is not sensitivity. It should have been specificity. So in this particular question, sensitivity is the correct option here because it does not come in the Hill's criteria of causality. So what do you mean by Hill's criteria of causality? See, we have an exposure, we have an outcome. So we define, first we see whether there is some relationship between the exposure and outcome. So that we have correlation, right? Then we try to see whether there is actually an association, a statistical association between this particular exposure and this particular outcome. So that we have different statistical tests to check for association. The third one or the higher one is what you call as the causation or causality. That is saying that whether this particular exposure caused this outcome. Okay, it's not just association or correlation. We are talking about the whether this is a causative thing for the outcome. For example, smoking causing lung cancer. I'm not telling smoking is associated. What I'm going to talk about is smoking causing or this particular exposure is causative of this outcome. So for that, we can't just say based on one or two assumptions. No, we need a set of criteria. If the relationship is following these criteria, then you can say that, okay, this particular exposure is causative of this particular outcome. So for that, we have something called as the Hill's criteria of causality. Which are the criteria? We have 8-9 criteria. We'll just write each one and I'll tell you what each one is. Again, this is also an important area. So, which are the Hill's criteria of causality? The first and the most important criteria of causality is what you call as the temporality. That is the first criteria. What do you mean by temporality? It is that the cause must precede effect. It's just like the egg and hen or chicken and egg dilemma. That is, the cause has to be first. When I'm saying smoking is positive or smoking is related to lung cancer, first the patient has to smoke, right? First the patient should be smoking for a period of time. Only after the exposure, then only lung cancer should come. Only then I can say that there is like this particular exposure is causative of this particular outcome. This criteria is called as temporality. Temporality says that the cause must precede your effect. And this one, this is considered as the absolutely essential criterion. So that is an MCQ point here. So which one of the following is an absolutely essential criteria among Hill's criteria of causality? Answer is temporality. And which studies gives you temporality? There is only one of the major studies that gives you temporality is your cohort study. Only cohort studies you can tell, no, that this particular exposure came before the outcome, because we are starting with exposure and outcome and then we are following them up. So cohort studies gives you the temporality. Okay, that's the first one. Second criteria is strength of association. So for calculating strength of association, we have different measures, like we have the odds ratio in your case control study. We have relative risk in cohort studies, RCTs. So these measures gives you the strength of association. So the criteria is that if you have a strong association, that means this exposure is more a costly factor for your outcome. So more the association or stronger the association, more likely that the exposure is a causal factor. That is the second criteria. Third one is consistency. So the association you got should be repeatedly, everybody who is doing this particular study in similar settings and with similar circumstances should repeatedly get the same association or consistently get the same result. That is what you mean by consistency. The fourth criteria is specificity. Specificity says that this particular specific exposure is specifically related to this particular disease. So if I have smoking is specifically associated with lung cancer only. So do you think you think it is easy to establish? No. Specificity is the most difficult criteria to establish. Why? Because most of the diseases that we are dealing with today is multifactorial, right? If you take cancer, if you take any cancer, the risk factors, if I take lung cancer, also smoking is one of the risk factors. Age is another risk factor, or many other risk factors, genetic factors can be there. So many other risk factors will come into play. So specificity is it's the most difficult criterion to establish. So that is another MCQ. Most difficult criterion would be your specificity. Fifth one is your dose response relationship. Also called as biological gradient. Simple. Increase the dose, then you should get a more response. That is what you mean by dose response relationship. Meaning somebody who has been smoking, say 10 cigarettes for 10 years. That guy, every day he's smoking, say 10 cigarettes for 10 years. He has a higher risk of developing cancer than somebody who's been smoking, say, occasionally 2 or 3 cigarettes in a week for 10 years. Okay, so with increase in the dose, you are expecting an increase in the response. That's what you mean by dose response relationship. Now, the next one is biological plausibility. That means whatever association you are trying to define is consistent with the existing biological knowledge. If I say lung cancer is caused by smoking, I should have some biological, knowledge or proof behind that to establish that, okay, this is there. That is what you mean by biological plausibility. Next criteria would be coherence. Coherence also kind of same. That's whatever cause-effect interpretation that you're going to make does not conflict with the existing knowledge. We have certain studies already done and with the existing knowledge or with the natural history of the disease that we know, your finding should not be in conflict with that. That is what you mean by coherence. Then you have two more criteria, sir, that is experimental evidence, saying that usually experiments, when you are considering the studies, experimental studies like RCTs, they give a better causal or stronger causal association than compared to your observational studies. Okay, so these are all the different, and we have one more criteria which is called as analogy. It says that similar exposures have been shown to, end up in similar diseases. These are all the Hill's criteria for causality. Now, how do you remember it? We have the full name is actually Bradford Hill criteria for causation. And to remember that, I have a mnemonic for you, that is Scooby TS. Okay, you remember Scooby-Doo? I don't know whether in your time you have seen Scooby-Doo cartoons, but in our times we had Scooby-Doo in Cartoon Network. So Scooby will help you to remember the Hill's criteria of causality. Let's see. And TS also, just like your initial, you take Scooby TS. Then only I'll have my mnemonic complete. So what is Scooby-Doo? Scooby TS? SCOOBY and TS. Let me start with T and S because T is the most important of all the Hill's criteria. So T stands for what? Temporality. S is for the specificity. Temporality is the most important one. Specificity is the most difficult one to establish. Okay. Now, so T and S, I hope you will remember TS. Now we'll go with S. S is Scooby S. First S is for strength. Strength of association. C is for consistency. BY is for biological plausibility. O is for observational coherence, or you can simply say coherence also. But for the sake of the mnemonic, I have to say observational coherence. Okay. Now we have one more O. Here, you have to remember it like this. This dose response relationship. Ideally should be a D, but then my mnemonic won't match with a D. So you remember the second letter. Okay, dose response relationship. So these are some of the most important criteria under the Bradford Hill criteria of causation. I hope that is clear to you, and you will be able to answer without wasting much time if you get a question on that. So we move on to the next question, fifth question. Case control study, which is wrong also, meaning which is the wrongly written statement in this particular options about case control study, and this is a multiple correct answer. So these are all based on the recall. So that's why the terminology might not be the same, but the idea and the question is almost the same. So case control study, which is not correct about case control study, is what they are asking you, and it has more than one option correct here. First option is matching cases and controls will prevent all confounding factors. Read the statement carefully. Matching cases with controls will prevent all confounding factors. So what is matching basically? In a case control study, you have to have cases, you have to have controls. And these two groups has to be similar. Only then you can make some inference, like, retrospectively thinking about the exposure and all that. First criteria is these two groups, the cases and controls have to be similar. So for that, we do something called as matching. And matching actually prevents the known confounders. If you see, if you have done a case control study, or if you read about how a case control study is being done, we match on certain factors like age, sex, like that. So if I take a 50-year-old male as a case, I'll try to take a 50-year-old male as a control. But the case is somebody who has the disease, control is somebody who doesn't have the disease. Other than that disease factor, other kind of variables like the age, sex, and all, how much I can do, I'll try to make them similar, or I'll try to match them. So matching will control only the known confounders. So when I'm stressing on known confounders, that means there is something called as what? Unknown confounders. See, we have many genetic factors which we don't know. There are genetic factors which are still under research, which might be contributing to certain diseases which we don't know. So those are all unknown confounders. We don't know many confounders. Your matching cannot deal with unknown confounders. It can only measure what? Known confounders, or it can only try to prevent known confounders. So your first statement itself is wrong here. So here, matching cases with controls will prevent all confounding factors. No, it does. It prevents only the known confounders. It cannot prevent the unknown confounders. First option. Second one, multiple controls for the same case can increase the power of the study. This is actually true. multiple controls for the same case will increase the power of the study, because you have a case, you have a control in 1:1 ratio. Then if you have a case, and for one case, if you have two controls, that is 1:2 ratio. In effect, when you're increasing the number of controls, you're increasing the sample size, right? Your study is becoming more, are becoming a study with more sample size. Once you're increasing the sample size, what happens to the power of the study? Power of the study is going to increase. Okay. Why do we need this? See, case control study is done for which type of cases? Mainly we do case control study for uh, rare cases, right? So rare cases, if I want to do a study on say some rare cancer, it might be difficult for me to achieve even 50 sample size. But then if I just do a study with 50 sample size cases and just 50 controls, it becomes only 100. So if I can take, instead of 1:1, if I can take 1:2, that is for each case, if I can take two controls, in effect, my sample size is going to increase rather than taking it as 1:1. So once the sample size is increasing, your power of the study will increase. So multiple controls for the same case can increase the power of the study is true. But remember, maximum is 1:4. For one case, you take maximum of 4 controls. Beyond that, there is no point in doing this, increasing the number of controls. It is not going to improve the power of the study. Next option, choosing hospital controls leads to selection bias is true. You know that, and we know the name of this bias. What is that? It's called as your Bergson's or Bergsonian's bias. So that is also a true statement. Last statement, case control studies provide incidence directly. Do you think it is correct? That is a completely wrong statement. Which study gives you incidence? It is cohort studies. Incidence can be found out only if you have a follow-up. You start with exposed, unexposed, and you follow them up. And when persons develop disease, you're able to pick them up. Then only you can calculate the new cases or incidents. Case control studies are retrospective studies where you take in known cases, that is deceased people and people who are not deceased, and then retrospectively ask them or try to find out about the exposure status. So incidence can never be found out in a case control study. So that is wrong. So here, which are the answers we have? What is wrong was also this first statement is also wrong, and your last statement is also wrong. So options A and D would be the correct options here. Okay. Moving on to the next question. And so before that, this is what a case control study looks like. You start with cases and controls. No need to by heart anything. You start with cases. Whom do you call a case? A deceased person is what you call as a case in wards also, right? So you start with cases or deceased, and you have a non-deceased controls. Then the investigator retrospectively compares the previous exposures. This is how a case control study is. And it's also called as a what study? Retrospective study. What are steps in a case control study? Quickly we'll write. You have to select cases, selection of cases, and then you have to do selection of controls, right? What is the next step? You do matching. Your cases and controls have to be similar, so you do matching. Then ascertainment of exposure. So these are the steps these are basically the broad steps in a case control study. Now, what is the measure of association in a case control study? You call it as the odds ratio. So how do you draw the 2x2 table? See, case control study, they can give you from epidemiology, basically on study designs, 2 types of questions can be asked. One is they can ask you about the facts about the study design itself. They can give you a scenario, examiner will give you a scenario and ask you which is the study design we're talking about, or which is the best study design to do this particular study in this particular scenario. That is one. Second type of questions is direct numericals. You can be asked to calculate the odds ratio, or if it's a case control study, of course, odds ratio. If it's a cohort, you have different risk, relative risk. Then what? Attributable risk, population attributable risk. These things can be asked. RCT, again, number needed to treat, number needed to harm. NNH, NNT can be asked because epidemiology and biostatistics and even calculations are an important, favorite area for INI-CET exams. So we'll just roughly see how we are going to approach a numerical on odds ratio. When you get a case control study and you're asked to calculate the odds ratio, first step, draw the 2x2 table. Without drawing the 2x2 table, please don't attempt the question. You will go wrong. Okay. So you have to draw the 2x2 table. Case control study. So what will come on top? Cases and control. See, always on top, it's the truth. Truth is always on the top. And In case of a case control study, who is deceased, that is what we know. That is the truth that we know. So that will always come on the top. So cases is there. Then you have controls, and on the side you write the history of exposure, right? And this is no history of exposure. So here you have exposed people, and here you have non-exposed people. Cases controls with the numbers in the question. You fill in the all the blanks. So you have A, B, C, D, and what is odds ratio? Once you make the 2 by 2 table, you do the cross product. That will give you the odds ratios. That is AD by BC. Fill in the table, make the 2 by 2 table, fill in the values, cases controls on top, side you write the exposure status, fill in the numbers, just do the cross product ratio. That will give you the odds ratio. Okay. Odds ratio equal to 1 means no association. More than 1 shows it is a positive association, or this particular exposure is a risk factor for your outcome. Less than 1 shows a negative association, or it is protective. Okay. So this is about odds ratio. Now, what are the next type of case control studies? If I am talking, then I have to talk about cohort studies also. Cohort studies, quickly, we start with whom? We start with exposed people and non-exposed people. In the beginning of the study, you take people who are not having the disease in the beginning. You screen and make sure that you're recruiting people who do not have the disease at the beginning. So you start with exposed, non-exposed. You have to follow them up for a longer time, and then you compare who all are developing new disease. Or in other words, I can say you are comparing your incidence in both the groups, in the group of exposed as well as in the group of non-exposed. This is a basic structure of a cohort study. What are the clues in the question that will tell you this is a cohort study? Follow up. Okay, that is one word that will tell you this is a cohort study. Cohort study, you have exposed and unexposed people, and they are being followed up for a longer period of time, and then you compare the instance. That's how you do in a cohort study. Suppose I want to study the natural history of a disease. The best study design would be a cohort study, because I'm following them up and I can actually define the natural history of the disease when I'm doing a cohort study. Now, what are the steps in a cohort study? So you have an exposed group, you have an unexposed group, and both the disease should be free of the disease. Both the groups should be disease free at the baseline. Follow them up over time, and then you compare the incidence. Okay. And since you are getting incidence or risk, and since there is follow up, you can actually calculate the risk in a cohort study. We have relative risk, we have attributable risk, you have population attributable risk. See, all these things can be calculated in a cohort study, and temporality can be established in a cohort study. Okay. What are the types of cohort? We have a prospective cohort, you have a retrospective cohort, and you have an aspirant cohort, right? So this is all based on the timing of when you start the study with respect to your exposure and outcome. So there's an exposure, there's an outcome, and when you're starting the study, it determines whether you're dealing with the prospective cohort, retrospective cohort, or an aspirant cohort. For the prospective cohort, you are say, I am in 2026. At present, I am there. And now the exposure and the outcome has not occurred. So now I'm going to start with the exposure outcome at this particular point, and then I'm going to follow them up to the future. That's a prospective study. Retrospective study is exposure and outcome has already occurred before I started the study, but I'm going to follow them up from the exposure to the outcome only, but both has occurred before the start of my study. That is a retrospective study. In between, if I'm there in between, the exposure has already occurred, I am here, and the outcome is about to occur. So if I'm in between, then it becomes a aspirant or a combined study. Okay. Next, commonly asked, and how do you draw the 2 by 2 table for a cohort study? Just like we did for the case control study. In cohort also, when you are asked to calculate the risk, construct the 2 by 2 table first. So in cohort, you have disease developing. Those who develop the disease, always disease is on the top. I told you truth is on the top, right? Disease develop, how many people develop the disease, we write here. Those who do not develop the disease, right here. And the exposure, those who are exposed, we have two groups, right? We have an exposed and non-exposed group. That comes on the side. Now you write you fill in all the values. Now what is relative risk? Relative risk is IE by IUE. That is instance in exposed by instance in the non-exposed. What is the instance in exposed? So total exposed would be A plus B, and total non-exposed is C plus D. Instance in exposed is A by A plus B. Instance in non-exposed is C by C plus D. So A by A plus B divided by C plus D will give you the relative risk. Just like your odds ratio, relative risk equal to 1, no association, more than 1, positive association, less than 1, negative association. That's how you're going to calculate the relative risk. Another question. You have a case control study, retrospective cohort study, and a prospective cohort study. So don't confuse between case control and a retrospective cohort. See, case control study and retrospective cohort, both studies you're taking data retrospectively, right? But you see the direction of how, you see which is a starting point to identify whether this is a case control or a retrospective cohort. Check for the starting point. The key is the starting point. Okay. So in case control study, you always start with the cases and controls. Start with cases and controls, and then you go back and find the exposure. So if you start with the outcome, going back and finding out the exposure, that is a case control study. But when you talk about cohort study, I told you we always start with the exposure status, exposed, unexposed, and then you go and trace the outcome. You go and follow up and find out the outcome. So even if it's a retrospective cohort, when the outcome and exposure has already occurred before, but you start with the exposed, unexposed group, and then you go to the outcome. So its direction is always exposure to outcome. Then don't get confused. If you're starting with exposure and going to the outcome, it is a cohort study. So if both has occurred before, that becomes a retrospective cohort study. Now moving on to the next question. So this is about your p-value. So a clinical trial reports a p-value of 0.03. Okay. Which is the most appropriate interpretation? So you have done a clinical trial, the p-value is given as 0.03. Now, which is the correct interpretation is what is being asked. Probability that null hypothesis is true is 3%. Probability of observed or more extreme result assuming null hypothesis is true is 3%. Study is 97% accurate. Result is clinically significant. Okay. So what do you mean by p-value of 0.03? P-value less than 0.05 is considered as statistically significant. Okay. So a p-value, remember the number, it is less than 0.05. You consider that it is a statistically significant relationship. Okay. So you will first rule out the options. You see the first, you see the last option here. Result is clinically significant. No, our the p-value or the statistical analysis, everything you do is to prove that it is statistically significant, not clinically significant. For clinical significance, you have to do clinical and clinically correlate. But here, this option is wrong. Why? Because we are talking about p-value is talking about statistical significance. It's not talking about clinical significance. Okay. Probability that null hypothesis is true is 3%. See, whenever you do a study, any study, we have two kinds of hypotheses. Okay, you have a null hypothesis and an alternate hypothesis. Null hypothesis says that there is no relation. Null means no. Alternate says that there is a relationship. Okay, if I'm taking say two drugs, if I'm comparing a two drugs, or I invented a new drug which is going to improve your memory. You are going to write medpg or your INI-CET, and I've invented a drug, and if you take this drug, it is going to boost your memory. Okay, suppose that is a drug. So null hypothesis will be, might this new drug X is not going to do any change. No change in the memory with respect to the previous drug. Okay, that is my null hypothesis. Alternate hypothesis says that there is some change. So null says nothing. Alternate says there is a change. Okay, we start with two hypotheses, and always we assume that any study you do, you assume with nothing. You assume that null hypothesis is true, and then we do the study. So in that case, if I say that probability that null hypothesis is true is 3%, that statement is wrong. Because any study you are assuming that when you're going to calculate the p-value, you assume that your null hypothesis is 200%. Then you do the study, you do the statistical test, everything, you come at a p-value, and then you think about whether or not to accept this particular null hypothesis or to reject the hypothesis. It is not related to this percentage. So the statement is wrong. Study is 97% accurate is also wrong. It doesn't say that way. If it p-value is 0.03, doesn't mean that 97% the study is accurate, 3% inaccurate. No, that is also a wrong interpretation. Option B is the correct answer here. That is probability of observed or more extreme result, assuming that null hypothesis is true is 3%. See, when I say p-value is 0.03, that means that whatever result I got, the observed or extreme result that I got, probability of getting that result is 3%. Okay, that is assuming that null hypothesis is true. The option B is the correct answer here. I know this is a bit confusing, so we'll try to understand the concept of p-value with respect to the hypothesis. Okay, so be with me. So here you see, first point is what is the value of significance? P-value less than 0.05 is significant. So if p-value is significant, you reject the null hypothesis. So how we are going to do the study? We'll break down step by step so that you understand it. See, if you have already know the concept of p-value hypothesis, you have some mnemonic and all, you have learned it. Please don't try to rechange it or relearn it. If you are still confused, you're fresh, then try to learn in this way. Okay, so I'm going to start here. So step one, any study you are going to do. So the step one is going to be, we have two hypotheses, right? Any study, you start with two hypotheses. One is an HO, or what you call as the null hypothesis. Next one is the H1, or your alternate hypothesis. So null hypothesis say there is no effect or no difference. So your drug is not going to work. That is what your null hypothesis is going to say. Alternate says that there is an effect, or the drug that we are trying to study will work. That is your alternate hypothesis. So first step, you have two hypotheses. Step two, or the second step, is that we assume that null hypothesis is true. So you start, or you assume that nothing is happening. Okay, let's assume nothing is happening. Just like that, in step two, you assume that null hypothesis is true. Always, 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 we assume that null hypothesis is true. That is the next step. Now, step three, what you do is you go and do the study. You do the study. Okay, you do the study, you get result, you get data collection, you get the data, you analyze it, you apply all the statistical tests, you know. And once you do the test and all, then you get a p-value. Okay, so next step is, so that in the beginning of step 4, you have done the study, you have done all the statistical calculations, you have arrived at a p-value. Now in step 4, you have a p-value. Okay. Now you have to interpret this p-value and the hypothesis. So remember that the p-value is actually a measure of chance. You have an effect, you have an outcome. Okay. And we are basically trying to find out whether there is some association between this exposure and the outcome, or some relationship between the new drug and the treatment output. Okay. So p-value is a measure of chance, meaning that any study you do, however good you do your study is, however correct your method is, when you're trying to find out the relationship between an exposure and outcome, sometimes some spurious effect just comes purely due to chance, which cannot be omitted. Okay. So when you get a result, mostly it can be a real result, or it can be due to some issues in the study, like bias or confounding would have caused the result. Third one is a random error or a chance variation. Just like that, because of pure chance. Okay, just like you toss a coin, just because of chance, this result came. That can also occur, right? So your p-value is actually measuring that particular aspect, or how much is the random error, how much is this result because of chance is what your p-value is measuring. So p-value reflects your p-value. It reflects how likely your result is due to random error or due to chance. Or you can say that p-value is the P for probability. Probability of obtaining the observed result, whatever result you got in your study. So it is the probability of obtaining the observed result due to chance alone. Assuming that null hypothesis is true. So suppose you got a small p-value, that is p-value less than 0.05, or chances just 5%. This means that your random error or the chance factor in your result is less than 5%, just very less. Okay, less than 5% only, whatever result I got, only less than 5% of this is because of chance. That means 95% of the time it might be due to the real effect. Okay, only 5% is chance. That is actually permissible. I cannot make it 0% chance. So less than 5% is something I'm okay with. Okay, I'm agreeing that, okay, this is less than 5% chance. I'm okay with it. So that in that case, your study is actually valid, or you reject your null hypothesis. So once you get a small p-value which is significant, which says that the measure of chance or the result you get because of chance is very less than 5%, that means there is actually there is a significant association, or you can say that there is some effect. So you're rejecting your initial assumption of null hypothesis true, or you reject your null hypothesis and you accept your alternate hypothesis. This is the importance of p-value. So just the opposite, if you get a large p-value, suppose my p-value is more than 0.05. This means that more than 5% of the result that I got is due to chance. So that means my, the real effect might not be that much. So this 5% or p 0.05 is something that statisticians or we have agreed, okay, up to 0.05 is fine. That's something that we have already agreed. That value you cannot change. So p less than 0.05 is statistically significant. If it is more than 0.05, that means more than 5% of the result could be easily due to chance. And that means there is no much effect. So in that case, you accept the null hypothesis that there is nothing, no much effect. So you accept the null hypothesis and you reject the alternate hypothesis. So this is the basic concept behind p-value and your hypothesis. Always we have two hypotheses and we begin with the assumption that your null hypothesis is true. Then you do the study, you do the statistical test, everything. Then you find out the p-value and now you interpret the p-value. If the p-value is significant or if the p-value is less than 0.05, that means your result is unlikely that it is all due to chance. So you reject your null hypothesis and you accept your alternate hypothesis. So that's the basic idea behind p-value. I hope that question is clear to you. We'll move on to the next question. So a clinical researcher plans a randomized control trial, RCT, to evaluate a new antihypertensive drug. Participants are first screened based on their predefined eligibility criteria, then allocated to intervention control groups, followed by masking of participants and investigators, and finally outcome assessment is performed. Which of the following correctly represents the sequence of steps? See, in INI-CET, mostly you get large questions. Okay, that is actually, kind of distracting. And so you should have that, you do the questions only, then you will get it. You'd have that habit of reading the questions fast and picking out what are the important points. So here actually nothing is much important because that question is direct. Which of the following correctly represents the sequence of steps in an RCT? That's what they're asking. Options are randomization is there, inclusion, exclusion is there, blinding is there, analysis is there. You have to choose which is the correct order of steps in conducting an RCT. That's a simple question here. So you start with which one? See the options carefully and just try to answer the question. So every time in a randomization, in an RCT, you start with selecting the participants. For that, you need inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria. So here you start with inclusion, exclusion, right? Then what do you do? Then this is inclusion, exclusion is kind of screening. You have to select your eligible participants. You have an RCT, you have a trial to do. So you select the eligible participants. You have certain inclusion criteria. You have to exclude some people. So you have some exclusion criteria. You select the participant based on that. That's the first step. Next one is now you have to allocate your participants into either the control arm or the intervention arm, right? For that, we do something called as the randomization. So that is the next step. After randomization, now people are put into control arm and intervention arm. Now you actually have to give the intervention. When you're giving the intervention, you have to blind the participant, the investigator, as well as the person who's doing the analysis. So it can be either single blinding, double blinding, or triple blinding. So that happens once you are trying to assign or once you are giving the intervention. So the next step will be blinding. And after that, you get the result and then finally you go for the analysis. The option is B, inclusion, exclusion, randomization, analysis, blinding and then analysis. So this is the just an outline or the structure of how you're going to do an RCT. You have a study population, you have inclusion, exclusion, everything. Randomization is done. Either the person goes into a intervention arm or a control arm. Okay. And then you assess for the outcome and do the analysis. Next question. In a study, participants are allocated to intervention and control groups using random number table. So this random number table is nothing but a method to do randomization. Okay. So what does this do? This method helps to. Basically, the question is, what does randomization do? Or what is the use of randomization? We just tweaked and asked you. Okay. Options are eliminate selection bias, control confounding by equal distribution, ensure blinding, and increase sample size. So you can actually rule out the last option, right? This just because you're allocating people into two groups, it's not going to increase your sample size. Blinding is also not correct. So option A and B both are correct. This is actually a multiple choice question. Like you can choose more than one answer here. You may get like A and B are true, A, B, and C are true. Such kind of a question. So randomization actually eliminates selection bias and also it controls confounding by equal distribution of the confounding factors. So we'll see what randomization is. And MCQ point, which step is considered as the heart of the RCT? The heart of the RCT is randomization. Okay, our randomization is considered as the heart of RCT has been asked. That's an MCQ point for you. So let's write down about randomization. First, so this is the step which is considered as the heart of an RCT. So basically, what do you mean by randomization? It's a statistical procedure by which you allocate participants into the study groups, either the control group or the intervention group by chance. You're not selecting them and putting, it is purely statistical procedure. You have random number table, you can do it in Excel. Different methods are there for randomization, but basically purely due to chance, when a person comes, they get allocated either into the control arm or the intervention arm. You have no say in putting that people into the different arms. So that's what you mean by randomization. It's just like you're allowing luck to decide whether this person should go into the control arm or the intervention arm. So randomization helps to actually eliminate selection bias because the investigator is not going to sit and select and say, okay, this guy is going to the control group, this guy is going to the intervention group. No, it is randomization that is doing the work. So it eliminates selection bias. Second, another important point is it helps to control or it makes the two groups, the control and the intervention arm comparable by making equal distribution of the confounders. So it makes the both groups comparable by almost putting the or balancing the confounders. And unlike matching here, when I say it is distributing, kind of equally distributing the confounders, it means known confounders as well as unknown confounders. Okay, so this is one point which we matching. In addition to known confounders, it can also distribute the unknown confounders, like you might have genetic factors or other unknown things. Those are also getting distributed in case of your randomization. That's a big advantage of the randomization. Okay, we'll just quickly see a table which compares randomization and blinding. Again, a high table asked previously. So purpose of randomization is to distribute confounders evenly by chance. Matching is based on what you're matching them. Okay. Confounder control, both known and unknown confounders in randomization. Matching can only match for known confounders. So superior one is randomization than your matching. Moving on to the next question. So a drug reduces mortality from 10% to 5%. What is the number needed to treat? What is NNT? So we are talking about an RCT and your question is NNT. We have two terms, NNT, that is number needed to treat, and you have something called as NNH. What is that number needed to harm? We'll see what these two are quickly. Okay. So number needed to treat is how many patients you have to treat to avoid one adverse outcome. That is what you mean by number needed to treat, or how many persons I need to treat before I can prevent an adverse outcome. Let it be death. So I have a new drug which is going to reduce death due to cardiovascular diseases. Okay, so my NNT or number needed to treat is a number which says that how many people I have to treat in order to prevent one death. So if my NNT is say 20, that means I need to treat 20 people in order to prevent one additional death. So what do you want an NNT to be a higher number or a lesser number? Obviously, we want to have a lesser NNT, right? If I'm treating two people and the third person I can say, that is obviously better than me treating 50 people and then saving one person. So for an ideal drug or for a good drug, you need a lesser NNT or number needed to treat. That is the basic concept behind NNT. Similarly, you have NNH or number needed to harm. See, when there is a drug, it has a some good effect. Similarly, all drugs have some or the other side effect also, right? Which we don't want, but it happens. So NNH or number needed to harm is how many people I need to treat so that at least one person gets a harm, which we don't want. Harm, I don't want to harm anyone with my drug, but I cannot eliminate it completely. So after treating how many people will at least one person get a side effect? That's what I mean by NNH or number needed to harm. Suppose I have 20 is my NNH. That means if I treat 20 people, the next person is going to end up with some side effect, say some rash or something. Okay, I'm going to harm the next person. So I want a bigger number for NN H or slower number. I mean, smaller number. Of course, I need a bigger number, right? If I'm treating, say, 500 patients and one person gets a side effect, that is still okay. But if I'm taking three patients and the fourth one gets a side effect, I'll be thrown out of the hospital, right? So we need a big NNH and a small NNT for a good drug. The basic concept behind NNT and NNH, we'll just write it down. So NNT is, the simple concept is how many patients needed to be treated for one. So NNT is how many patients to be treated to prevent one adverse outcome. Okay, that is NNT. And you get it by the formula. NNT is equal to 1 by ARR. ARR is absolute risk reduction. Okay, so here we'll just calculate and then we'll move on. So here they've given you that a drug reduces mortality from 10% to 5%. So what is ARR? ARR is nothing but absolute risk reduction, that is 10% minus 5% will give you 5%. So here the ARR is 5% directly given in the question. Now they've asked you to calculate the NNT. I told you NNT is 1 by ARR, or that is 1 by 5% is what? 0.05. That will give you 1 by 0.05 will give you 20. So here the answer is 20. Okay, I hope that is clear to you. Now the same thing only, what we just explained, NNT is how many patients need to be treated for one person to benefit or to prevent one adverse outcome. And it is got by the formula NNT is 1 by ARR. Okay. Similarly, NNH is how many patients needed to be treated for one person to get the side effect or get a harm. Formula is 1 by ARI. So 1 by ARR is NNT. ARR is absolute risk reduction. NNH or harm is 1 by ARI or absolute risk increase. So in the question, you will be given ARR or ARI or the value so that you can compute that. And if you take the reciprocal, you're going to get NNH or NNT. Concept about NNH and NNT will be asked in INI-CET. NEET might not ask, but INI-CET people do ask NNH and NNT. Okay. So we want a lower NNT, which is better, and a higher NNH, which is safer. So remember, lower NNT and higher NNH is what we want in our new drug. That was about NNH and NNT. And how can you remember that NNT is 1 by ARR and not ARI? Because, directly factual questions will be asked. NNH is reciprocal of ARR or ARI. So remember, ARI, so A1 is the great musician we have, and his music is always therapy. The music or ARR's music is a therapy. It is equivalent to a therapy, music therapy. So T for therapy or treatment is related to ARR. So N and T is 1 by ARR. That's how I remember. I hope that will help you also. Okay. We're moving on to the next question. So now we have almost discussed all the questions from epidemiology part. We'll take a question from the program aspect. Question is, under the National Program for Prevention and Control of Cancer, Diabetes, Cardiovascular Diseases and Stroke, NPCDCS, Update. What is the new name? Now we don't call it as NP-CDCS. You have a simpler name. It is NP-NCD, National Program for Non-Communicable Diseases. Okay. So under this particular program, which of the following screening method is not performed? Not performed. They are asking you which is not performed at PHC level, a primary healthcare level. So options are VIA. What is VIA? Visual inspection with aesthetic cancer for cancer cervix. Option B, oral cavity examination or oral cavity cancer using mammography at primary level, screening done after this. As per your NPNC, every person who's screened for your hypertension, three cancers, which are there: breast and cervical cancer. Commonly seen cancers in India. And why have the program chosen breast cancer, oral cancer, cervical cancer for this NPCDCS, why those things are not chosen? See, we are talking about program. We are going to the grassroots level, ground level, screen people with the limited resources we have, and then picking up people, right? So for that, you need to choose diseases which can be screened at the primary healthcare level. For cancer cervix, you have VIA, we have your pap smear, can also be done at a PHC level. So that is why one cancer which we have chosen in the NP and is CS cervix. Oral cavity, oral cancer, what do you see? To examine the oral cavity, right? Testing is not an easy be done even at the house level also. That we can advise them to do. We can teach them, or the clinician can do even the ANM can help the person to do the self-breast examination, or it can be done self, right? So that's why we have taken these three cancers under the NP-NCT program. And when you see the option C, mammography is done using a USG thing. So for mammography, we cannot, it is difficult to do at a primary level. It can be done, nothing is impossible, but in a practical aspect of view, from a PhD level, you cannot do a mammography. So option C is the correct answer here, or this cannot be done. VIA for cancer cervix can be done at the primary level. It is being done. Oral cavity examination is also being done. For CA breast, what you do is a self-breast examination. And if there is something doubtful, you have to refer the patient to a CHC or a higher level for a mammography or a USG. Okay. And screening done is after 30 years of age. All these are true. So whenever you get a question like this, remember that we are opting for simple, low cost and feasible interventions or feasible things that you can do at a primary healthcare setting. So then hence the answer is C here. What is this? This is a logo for your NP-NCD. This is again, it's an old image. So we have NP-CDC is written here, but the new name is NP-NCD, National Program for Non-Communicable Diseases. All national logos are important. You know all the NP-NCD. Few people who are being screened, people who are above studies. Community-based screening, the ASHA has the feedback form. This list given to the ASHA worker. She has checked house So am I audible? So sorry for the error again. We had some technical issues, so now we are back. So we are talking about NP-NCD, 2 points I've discussed. So next point is what we call cancers we are screening at this particular level also has been discussed. And lifestyle modification. So it's not just screening, okay? Lifestyle modification is also a core component of your NP-NCD program. Moving on to the next question. So a field team screens only first degree relatives of patients with hypertension and diabetes in a village. During the same visit, they perform multiple tests on those selected. The strategy used for identifying the target group is. So here, this is a question on screening. And two things they are telling. First thing is, a field team screens only first degree relatives of patients. So what is this? You're only screening the high risk group. Okay. And during this same visit, they perform multiple tests on those selected. So simple single visit multiple tests, that becomes a multi-phasic screening. So they're talking about a high risk screening or a selective screening as well as a multi-phasic screening. Question is that strategy used for identifying the target group. The question is not how they have tested. They are asking you what is the strategy for identifying the target group. Has they screened everyone? No. They have not done a mass screening. Multi-phasing screening has been done. It is not opportunity screening also. It is selective screening that has been done here, right? Because only the high risk group, only first degree relatives of patients have been selected. So this is an example of a selective screening. So selective screening is the answer here. Multi-phasic screening has also been done, but if you see the question properly, they have asked you the strategy in identifying the target group. For that, it is your selective screening. Okay. Now we'll just discuss the types of screening quickly. So types of screening can be, we have different classifications. First one is how you're going to screen people. Whether you screen everybody in the population, that becomes as mass screening, right? Or you select only those who are at high risk. So you call it as a high risk screening or also selective screening. Both are the same. Then you have a multi-phasic and a multi-purpose screening also. Multi-phasic screening is you're applying to a more test in combination to large number of people at a time. For example, annual health checkup is an example of a multi-phasic screening. You have all your employees, you try to measure the BP, you check the RBS. So many things at the same time you're checking, that is multi-phasic screening. Multi-purpose screening is you are doing more than one test to detect more than one disease. Suppose a pregnant lady comes to you. Okay, somebody is pregnant, she comes to you. First time is if you screen for many things. You screen for hepatitis, HBsAg you screen, VDRLs you screen, many things you screen. No, that is a multi-purpose screening. Different things you want to find out. So that is multi-phasic and multi-purpose screening. We have one more type of classification, that is your presumptive and prospective screening. You have a prescriptive screening and a prospective screening. Prescriptive screening is for me. You see a E here, so that is for me. And prospective, O, is for others. So I get a symptom, I have a doubt that, okay, I have some kind of disease. So I go and screen, I do a test. That is prescriptive screening where I as request for the screening. Okay, and it's not from some authority or anything. I, as a patient or as somebody who has a doubt that I have some disease, I screen for my own benefit. That is a prescriptive screening. Prospective screening is the authorities, the government authorities. So somebody says to screen people to benefit others or to prevent disease in the other people. For example, when you in an airport, when immigrants, people from other country come in an airport, when there is immigrant, they use screen for certain diseases. Okay, that is not for the benefit of that person who is coming. No, that is for the benefit of others in the country. He shouldn't give some disease to other people there. That is screening of immigrants or HIV screening among sex workers. The main objective is, yeah, we have to treat them. Of course, if we get that they have a disease, you have to treat them. But the main objective is to prevent the transmission of the disease to others. So prospective screening is done for others and prospective screening is for me, myself. If I'm the patient, it's for me. Okay. So which one is an example of a primary prevention, which is an example of a secondary prevention? Remember, the screening in general, if you are asked what is screening, it is an example of secondary prevention. S for S, screening for secondary. Why? Because screening is basically you are trying to find out disease in apparently normal people. That is, the term is apparently normal. They are not normal. They look normal. They're apparently looking normal, but they have the disease already before you're going to screen. But you're just picking up that disease so that you can give the early diagnosis and treatment. That's all. That is screening. That, or in simple words, that is prescriptive screening. This is an example of secondary prevention. But when you think of prospective screening, it is for others. For others you're doing, and you're actually trying to prevent the disease itself in the prospective screening, but not in the person who's been getting screened, but for the others. So that is an example where you're going to prevent the disease is an example of a primary prevention. Okay. This is the next level of MCQ with respect to prevention and screening. Usually we say screening is as far as secondary prevention. But if specifically asked about prospective screening, remember that is not secondary, that is primary prevention. Okay. Moving on to the next question. No, sorry, not for the next question. This is just showing you the 2x2 table basics for all calculation in screening chapter. So you draw just like your odds ratio relative risk. When you have a screening related question where you are asked to calculate sensitivity, specificity, positive predictive value, negative predictive value, whichever value, draw the 2x2 table first and then only go. Again, here also truth is on the top. So your disease and non-disease people are on the top. Your screening test result is on the side, whether it is positive screening test, negative result, and the gold standard is on the top. Then you have your true positive, false positive, false negative, and true negative. And then you calculate the sensitivity, specificity, positive predictive value, and negative predictive value. Quick way to calculate is any method. First thing is draw the 2x2 table. After that, draw like this. Okay, starting from this point. This will give you the sensitivity. Sensitivity is your true positives divided by TP plus FN, right? Out of the total disease people, how many are actually positive as per your test? That is sensitivity. How correctly your test is picking up the true positives. So if you draw like this, here this becomes the TP is the numerator and the total thing. The TP plus FN becomes the denominator. So that is sensitivity. Similarly, if you draw like this, TP again becomes the numerator and TP plus what is your FP? Both this becomes the denominator. This becomes your PPV. Okay. Similarly, here if I start it from true negative, and if I draw like this will give you the specificity, and this is my negative predictive value. Okay. This is an easier way to do calculations if you are actually lacking time, and if you want to check also, you can do this. So this was sensitivity. What is PPV is? True positives divided by all test positives, right? Similarly, here if I draw from this point, from true negatives, if I start, this will give me my specificity, and this will give you my negative predictive value. Negative predictive value will be your Tn divided by this sum. So it's all negatives, Tn plus Fn. Specificity is again, numerator will be Tn, two negatives out of all truly not diseased people or all truly healthy people. So that's how you calculate the sensitivity, specificity, PPV and NPV. Moving on to the next question. A public health researcher is exploring multiple contributing factors such as lifestyle, environmental exposure, healthcare access responsible for increasing incidence of disease in a community. Aims to qualitatively map possible causes and their interrelationship rather than quantify associations. So somebody is doing a research and their aims to find out the qualitative factors. And they've told that it is not to find out the quantifying or to quantify the associations. So which is the most appropriate tool? You have bar diagram, histogram, multiple regression model, and Ishikawa or fishbone diagram. So question is, somebody is doing a research on a qualitative thing. So it's a qualitative study. It's not a quantitative, it's a qualitative study. And which tool will you use in a qualitative study? So question is as simple as that, but they have given you an essay to find out. Okay. So what is bar diagram? All of you know the bar diagram. We draw it like this. We draw bars. And usually in case of categorical variable, we have a bar diagram. It just compares different categories visually. That's all. This is how a bar diagram looks like. Right? It compares like can be age group or anything. Just compares, categorical variables visually. That's a bar diagram. Histograms look similar to a bar diagram, but the bars, there's no space in a histogram. It looks like this. This is how a histogram comes, right? There is no space unlike your bar diagram. And histogram is used to show frequencies. It's not the category, but rather it is the frequency of distribution. Multiple regression model is a statistical technique for regression to find out the association between variables. It is a quantitative, or it quantifies association between variables. And what is this Ishikawa or fishbone? This is your answer here. Okay. In qualitative studies, we have to find out the, what is the root cause for certain problem. We'll identify a problem and then we try to find out the causes of that problem. For that, we have a specialized diagram or a tool which is called as the Ishikawa diagram or a fishbone diagram. So that is the answer here. So this is how it looks like. It looks like a fishbone, right? It has the stem, everything is there, and it has a head part, and then it has the fishbone kind of appearance. This is an example of a qualitative tool. This is what you call as a fishbone diagram, also called as an Ishikawa diagram. You see here, it actually shows the causes of a problem. So this is a problem here. So in this particular paper that I've taken, they have identified a problem of inadequate anthropometry practices of under 5 children. So, what is the cause for this problem? It can be because of people inadequate measurement, anthropometry measurements are not taken properly. So, because the people are not trained, that can be a reason. Can be because of the place, they don't have the proper instruments or something like that. It can be in the process or it can be in the policy or many things can be there. So, basically, this diagram is trying to find out what all are the causes which led to this particular problem. It's just like brainstorming and finding out what all are the issues behind this particular problem. So this is used in a qualitative study to help to find the root cause, and this is called as a Ishikawa or a fishbone diagram. What is qualitative research? See, we have two kinds of research basically. Broadly, you can have a quantitative research and a qualitative research. Quantitative research is actually quantifying, it is dealing with numbers and data and all that. So, it is actually quantifying. Like it tells you, for example, uh, mosquito nets. We have distributed mosquito nets in a community, and we are going and doing a study on and seeing how many percentage of the people are using the mosquito nets. That percentage or that number which you get is a quantitative part. But if I want to know why people are not using the mosquito nets, we have distributed the mosquito nets, but people are not using it. Why? That why component cannot be answered with numbers alone. No, we need to know the perspectives of the people, the experiences, their thoughts, everything has to be documented. That is not something that is measurable. Okay. That part is dealt in a qualitative research. So, in simple words, if I try to find out the percentage of people using a mosquito net, that becomes a quantitative research because I'm quantifying. But instead, if I want to find out why people are not using this mosquito net, that becomes a qualitative research. Okay. So your fishbone or Ishikawa is used in qualitative research. And in qualitative research, we have a researcher who studies the human behaviors, perspectives, experiences, mainly using non-numerical data. Okay. And there we have different tools. How do you collect data in qualitative? We need to talk to people, right? So we have key informant interviews are there. We have focus group, FGD you call it, focus group discussions are there. So the tools used are kind of different in a qualitative research. You can expect basic questions on qualitative research. That's why I just told you what the qualitative research is. Now, next question is from biostatistics. Again, a favorite area for INI-CET. Means people love biostatistics. Okay, let's see this. A biostatistician is matching statistical measures with a phenomena that is present in data interpretation. One of the following pairs incorrectly matched. Identify the incorrect pair. Simple question, identify which is wrong, which is wrongly matched. Mean median measures of dispersion. Standard error shows variability. Correlation coefficient shows relationship. Movements shows skewness. See, the answer is A. Mean and median are measures of what? Mean, median, mode are measures of central tendency. It is not dispersion. Okay, so that is the answer here. So we'll just quickly see which all are the categories and what are the common measures. Okay. These areas, the biostatistics area is very important. Quickly go through it and try to read, do questions only, then the biostatistics area you will be able to handle it. And this is a very high scoring and most probably most frequently asked area in INI-CET exams. So let's see what are the categories and common measures. I'll write down the category and the common measures. So measures of central tendency. We have mean, median, mode. These are the measures of central tendency. Second one, dispersion. Dispersion shows what? It shows variability or the spread of data. So it shows spread or variability. Here you have your range, then your interquartile range, standard deviation, then variance. All these are measures of dispersion. Next, position. With respect to the data, where is your particular point? That is a position. That is got by percentiles. You have set scores. Remember the growth chart? You have set scores there. Then quartile. All these tells you the position. Okay. Then the shape of data distribution. Shape of data distribution you get by skewness. Also have kurtosis. All these gives the shape of data distribution. Now the sampling variability, not the simple variability. I'm talking about the sampling variability. You get it by standard error. Standard deviation gives the dispersion. Standard error gives the sampling variability. And then for significance testings, we have p-value and confidence intervals. So this is just major categories and common measures used in biostatistics. Next question on what we just discussed now. Value on a growth chart indicates 75% of the population lies below it. So it's a value of what? Central tendency, dispersion, location, or position. See, 75% people lie below the 75%. That shows the location of that particular people, right? So here the answer is location or position. We have discussed about the other, categories here. Moving on to the next question. So, in a PHC, a researcher measures the weight of a group of 100 patients with diabetes and follows them up after 6 months to provide nutritional counseling. A medical researcher goes back and takes the data to perform a statistical significance testing. What test can be used to analyze the weight difference? So basically, you have 100 people with diabetes, you give them some nutritional counseling, then you measure it before and after. What was the weight of these 100, your 100 subjects before your counseling, and after 6 months, what was the improvement or what was the change in the weight after your nutritional counseling? This is what they are trying to do, and which is the TOS or test of significance that is being applied in this particular scenario. That is your question. So what do you mean by test of significance? See, I told you we have different studies. Whichever studies you try to find out some relationship between exposure and outcome. And we cannot do the study in the whole population. Only place where you enumerate the whole population is census. Okay, in India, we have census going on. So census is the only place where you do a whole enumeration of the population. Other than that, any study you take a sample of the population. And from that sample only, you do the study and then you try to generalize the findings of the sample to the your parent or your study population, right? And so whatever inference I'm making, whatever statistical things I get, whatever association I get, I need to see whether it is statistically significant or not. We told about p-value. So whether the association I got is just due to random chance or is it really there? For that, I need something. That is my statistical tools, or for that I have certain test which is called as the TOS or test of significance. So you, according to the situation, you have to apply some test and you do the test in statistical, your program will do the test for you. And then you get a p-value. Based on that p-value, see whether the p-value is significant or not. P-value less than, how much is significant? 0.05 is significant. So if it is less than 0.05, you say that, okay, my finding, whatever I got is significant. So for that, you first need to know which is the test of significance that has to be applied in particular situations. Test of significance is a favorite area, commonly asked. So we'll learn what is this. So before answering this particular question, let's see what are the different tests of significance. Now, I hope you understood why we are using this test of significance. This is writing TOS. So test of significance basically in a sample to see whether what we have found out in a sample is true. Whether it is statistically significant or not, we need to do some tests, some statistical tests. So basically, you have two types of tests. One is your parametric test. And the second class is your non-parametric test. See, parametric tests are done in cases where your data is normally distributed. So when you have a normal distribution of data, you go for parametric test. When you have a non-normal distribution, or you say it is skewed, that data you go for a non-parametric test. Usually the type of data in parametric is quantitative. Okay, or you get continuous variables. What's a continuous variable? Your height, weight, blood pressure. These are all continuous variables. That kind of data you get in parametric test. Sorry, for that kind of data, you go for a parametric test. Similarly, so here it will be opposite qualitative, that is categorical data. Example for categorical data can be, types of anemia. Mild, severity of anemia can be mild, moderate, severe. That's a category. It's not a continuous thing. Mild, moderate, severe. Or you can say gender, male, female. That is again a category. Okay, so these are all examples of qualitative data. In those cases, you go for a non-parametric test. And if it's a quantitative data or we're talking about parametric test, what will be the measure of central tendency? You will have to go for a mean. Usually the mean plus or minus standard deviation would be the measure of central tendency. But in case of your qualitative categorical data, you go for median, right? Either median or more commonly for proportions, percentages or fraction. All these things you go for a non-parametric test. Which one will be more statistically powerful? Of course, your parametric test will have a higher statistical power. And what are the examples? Remember the examples. Remember PAT for parametric test, PAT. Okay, here's your PAT. See, this is PAT, PAT the ghost. Just like you had Casper the ghost in this test for significance, our ghost, which is going to help you, is PAT. Remember PAT the ghost. PAT, PAT the ghost will help you to remember the names of parametric test. Parametric is, or ghosts are paranormal activity, right? Ghosts and all these things are paranormal. So you can remember that para is normal distribution. So parametric test is having a normal distribution. Normal distribution data will go for parametric test. So paranormal. And which are the examples? Your PAT, the ghost PAT is going to help you. PAT, that is P stands for Pearson's correlation coefficient. A stands for ANOVA and T stands for t-test. So these three tests, PAT, remember PAT, Pearson's correlation, ANOVA and t-test. T-test can be paired or unpaired. These are examples for parametric tests. Rest, almost all the tests you're going to find, your chi-square test, your Spearman correlation is there, Man-Whitney is there, Kuskal-Wallace is there. All these are examples for non-parametric tests. Except PAT, whatever test you see in the question paper, mark non-parametric. Okay, if you see PAT, Pearson's, ANOVA or T, that is an example of a parametric test. Direct question has been asked, which of the following is not a parametric test, which of the following is a parametric test, things like that. Okay. Now, when you're given a situation, how would you identify which is the test? We have simple 3 steps for it. Okay. First step is how many groups are there? How many groups is the researcher studying about? That's the first step. Okay. And the second step is which type of data is being analyzed, whether it is quantitative data or a qualitative data. And third one is whether the groups are related or independent. Just 3 steps. You follow the 3 steps, you will be able to answer which is the test we are talking about. First step, how many groups are there? If it is 2 groups of more than 2 groups, our test is going to differ. Okay. Second thing is whether you're dealing with quantitative data or qualitative data. I told you quantitative data, you have to measure what? Quantitative data will be measured in terms of mean plus or minus standard deviation. Qualitative data or your non-parametric data will be measured in terms of your proportion, fraction, and all that. 2 film stars will help you to remember the name of the test. Okay. PC. PC is Priyanka Chopra, right? PC for Priyanka Chopra, or you can remember it as, if it is proportion, you go for a test which is starting with C. That is chi-square test or Cochrane Q test. Mostly it is chi-square test at your level. The question that's going to come is big chi-square test. So if you find that there is 2 or more than 2 groups also, it is fine. And if the question is dealing with, say, proportions, we had 2 groups of people and the proportion of both groups of SS. So you want to find out whether this is significant, things like that. You're dealing with categorical data, you're dealing with proportions. Remember Priyanka Chopra, PC. So proportion, you're going to go for chi-square test. Now, coming to the next superstar here, we have Mammootty or MT. MT is if you have mean or average. So if you're dealing with your quantitative data or mean plus or minus standard deviation is being tested, in that case, go for T. Remember MT, T is for t-test. T-test can be paired or unpaired t-test. Again, that depends on whether groups are related or independent. If the groups are independent, you go for an unpaired t-test. If the groups are related, you go for a paired t-test. So you got a mean or quantitative data. Remember MT, so it is t-test. Then you see that the groups are related. Then you go for a paired t-test. If the groups are unrelated, you go for an unpaired t-test. What do you mean by this related? See, the before and after thing that we were talking about. You give an intervention. Before giving the intervention, you measure the variables. After giving the intervention, the same group you measure. So same group before and after is what you call as a related groups. So in that case, you go for a what? T-test, a pair T-test. Now coming back to the question we were discussing. So PHC, nutrition intervention given. You are measuring statistical significance, weight difference. So weight is a what variable? Weight is a quantitative variable. So that is a mean. And so if it's mean, remember Mamuti, empty. So it's a T-test. Since it is before and after, you are dealing with a paired T-test because it's related variable. So that's how you're going to find out the study groups. Now the same thing is whatever I've told you in mnemonic is being put in this table. Okay, so don't panic. And here there is a number of groups are there, type of variable is there, name of the test is there. Non-parametric test is also there, parametric test is there. At your level, mostly you will get questions from parametric test. So at least this much of the table you should know till the parametric test. Okay. So I'm showing it only this much. This much should be known. If possible, if you have time and like if you have already studied this, then if possible, it's good if you want that extra scoring marks, you can go for the non-parametric test also. But parametric test is mandatory. There is no excuse in that. You are definitely going to get a question. So here, if you have two groups or more than two groups, two independent groups, if it is P percentage, go for chi-square test. Again, two related groups also percentage, you go for chi-square test. And if it is two groups, mean empty, go for T-test. If it is related, it becomes a pair T-test. If it's unrelated, it becomes unpaired T-test, also called as student T-test. Unpaired T-test is student T-test. More than two groups, you have to go for ANOVA in case of your mean or quantitative variable. And instead of your T-test, your T becomes your Mamuti MT, that becomes MA. It becomes ANOVA if it is more than two groups. Okay. But the other one, the percentage or the qualitative, this thing, your Priyanka Chopra PC is universal. I know she's in Hollywood everywhere. So PC is not going to change. So even if it is two groups or more than two groups, P, if you see P, the other one is C. If you see percentage of proportion, the test is going to start with C. Mostly it is chi-square test, except in one place. If more than two related groups are there, you get a Cochrane's Q test. But mostly you are not going to be asked that much. You will at your level be chi-square test for percentages. This is how we are going to find out which is the test of significance. Simple example, I'm not going to write anything. We just said a simple example here. Suppose I have a study which compares the proportion of people who develop chickenpox among those who have immunized and not immunized. I have two groups, one group of immunized people, another group of unimmunized people, and I want to see the development of chickenpox in this. So here I have number of groups, two, immunized, unimmunized. The outcome data will be yes or no, whether you had chickenpox or no. So it is either a proportion or a fraction. This much percentage had chickenpox out of immunized. This much percentage had chickenpox out of the unimmunized. So we are dealing with two groups. We are dealing with a categorical data or a proportion or a percentage. Now the two groups are different, right? You are having the two different groups. It is immunized and unimmunized. Even without that, remember PC, two groups, percentage, U test is going to be which test? Chi-square test. So in that particular example, it is chi-square test. So that's how we are going to find out which is the test of significance. Now with that, I'm moving on to the next question. A population is divided into low, medium, and high disease burden groups, and subjects are randomly selected for each group, sampling method used. So here they have told you population is divided, and that means low, medium, and high disease burden groups. That means the population has been stratified, right? And then randomly selected. So we are talking about which type of sampling? We are talking about your stratified random sampling, where initially your people has been stratified into different groups and then random sampling has been done. So this is a type of sampling. Now, sampling can be of two types. Which are the two types? You have either probability sampling or non-probability sampling. Probability sampling examples are simple random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified sampling, and cluster sampling. Cluster sampling, one example of cluster sampling which I want you to remember is an example which is commonly asked is your 13:7 cluster sampling technique. Where is this used? 13:7 cluster sampling technique is used for immunization coverage. WHO used to, it is not now. Now we have the ELQUAS method, but WHO has been advocating this 13:7, has been applying this method to find out the coverage of immunization among children aged 12 to 23 months. So the 30 to 7 cluster sampling is commonly asked as an example for where is this used 13 to 7. This immunization coverage by WHO. Okay. Now, that was purposive, that was your probability sampling. Now, non-probability sampling, you have convenience sampling, voluntary response sampling, purposive sampling, and snowball sampling. Snowball sampling is when you have high risk population, not high risk, hard to reach populations. What is a snowball? You know, how was the snowball coming? So, from the top, it's a small snowball, right? But once it reaches down, rolls and reaches downstairs, once it reaches down, the snow will accumulate and the ball will become big. Just like that, suppose I want to do a study in a transgender population, and I'm saying that I'm doing a study in a transgender population. People are not going to come and open up because there is a stigma associated with LGBTQ. So they don't just come and tell me, okay, I'm a transgender, you do a study on me. No, I have to go and find out. So suppose I got one person who's transgender who revealed that he's a transgender. I do a study in him and I ask him, tell me who else is there in the transgender population. Maybe they may have some community and all that. So through him, I try to find out others. Then from the second person again, he might tell me, okay, this person is there, X and Y, she or he is there. So that way I can, recruit people in my study. That is just what I just explained now is how you do a snowball sampling. Okay. Next question. Your RMNCH plus A strategy by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare aims to provide comprehensive healthcare across various life stages. Target demographic for latest RMNCH plus N includes which of the following? So your RMNCH plus includes maternal child health, of course, yes. Family planning services, yes. That is what the R stands for, reproductive. Geriatric health, no. Geriatric health is not a component of your RMNCH plus N as of now. And adolescent health, of course, is a part of your reproductive and child health program. So your answer is going to be A, B, and D. Option should be C. A, B, and D is the correct answer. So what is RMNCH? R, M, N, C, A, H plus N. Okay. R is for reproductive. M is maternal. N is neonatal. C is child. A is adolescent health. So reproductive, maternal, neonatal, child, and adolescent health plus N. This is the last update here. It is nutrition. Last N is for nutrition. So this is RMNCH plus N. One MCQ, one liner. Your core concept of RMNCH plus N is continuum of care across life cycle. Okay. So continuum of care across life cycle is the core concept of this RMNCH plus N program. Under this, we have different aspects. Okay. We'll see one by one. Under the reproductive health, we have all reproductive health aspects. Maternal health, we have the maternal health aspect. So tell me what is the minimum number of visits? ANC visits ANC mother should have. Minimum number is 4 as per Indian guidelines. The WHO recommends minimum 8 visits. So in your question, if they ask you specifically Indian, say 4. If it's WHO minimum recommended, it is 8 visits. Okay. Now, what is the logo of this? What you see here? Under maternal health, we have JSY and JSSK. Which one is this and which one is this? Logos are important in BSM. We have to learn that. So this one, the yellow one you see here, the yellow mother and baby is JSSK. JSSK stands for Janani, that is mother. Shishu, that is a child. Suraksha Karyakram. So JSSK is Janani Shishu Suraksha Karyakram. So as the name indicates, all are getting benefited. It is not just the Janani, but also the Shishu. That is the mother as well as the child are getting benefited. Under the JSSK, the mother is eligible for free services, free delivery services, even if it's a normal delivery or a C-section also. Including a cesarean section, the mother is entitled to get free delivery services at a government hospital as per the JSSK. And it's not just the cesarean or the surgery. All the drugs, diagnostics, your blood transfusion, in case she needed a blood transfusion, that also, and also the diet, 48 hours at least. The diet also is being given free of cost from the government if she's delivering from a government health facility under JSSK. And what about the child? The child, if the baby has some illness or something, he also gets free, treatment, everything till the age of 1 year. Till his first birthday, he gets all the treatment free of cost from the government facility. And also the transport services. the ambulance transport from the hospital to the house or from the house to the hospital, that is also given free of cost under the JSSK. So when you see JSSK, it is not just the Janani, but also the Sishu who is getting benefited. Now, what about JSY? JSY stands for Janani Suraksha Yojana. The yellow mother and baby you see on screen is the logo for JSY or Janani Suraksha Yojana. Here it's only the Janani. Basically, this is to reduce the maternal mortality by promoting institutional deliveries. Mother goes and delivers at home. Nobody is there to take care of her. She goes into complications, hemorrhage, everything. Mother dies. PPS is one of the most common causes of maternal mortality. We don't want that to happen. We don't want any home deliveries to happen. So, to promote institutional deliveries, government came up with your JSY, which is your Janani Suraksha Yojana, where it says that it's a cash transfer scheme. If the lady, if the mother comes and delivers at an institute, at a hospital, government setup, she gets an amount of money. Okay, you give her the money, not just her, but the ASHA also. The ASHA worker who has actually recruited her or was accompanying her to the hospital, who was taking care of her antenatal components, she also gets the money. So the ASHA as well as the mother who's delivering gets money as per your JSY or Janani Suraksha Yojana. Under this, we have high performance states, low performance states, and the money differs, the hospital facility differs. But as of now, remember that it is a conditional cash transfer scheme under the government, that is JSY, to promote institutional delivery. That is the primary motive or objective, is to promote institutional deliveries. Now, what is this? You see another logo here. You see this is Lakshya, the black, the Kali, Ma and the baby is for Lakshya. So yellow, remember, for JSSK, then we had the orange mother and baby for JSY. Now coming to the Lakshya, you have a target also there, the bullseye, the target is also there. This is, and you see a Q here. Q is for quality. So basically, Lakshya is to, it's a labor room quality improvement initiative to improve the quality of services and the things provided at the labor room as well as the OT. So LR and the OT, so quality increasing or quality improvement, intrapartum quality improvement initiative. Intrapartum is where either it's in the labor room or the OT. So these two places, quality assessment or improvement in the quality, that's what the Lakshya is for. Now you have Suman. What is Suman? Suman stands for Surakshita Matrata Ashwasan. That is, again, this logo, the Suman has it's kind of a lotus, and you see a mother and a baby, and the word Suman. So Suman is Surakshit Matrata Ashwasan. This is an initiative to, it's an initiative to prevent maternal and newborn death and to ensure that the mother gets dignity and respect at the place of during the delivery. So every mother deserves to be taken, considered with dignity and respect with regard to the delivery. So that has to be ensured, and in case of any denial to services, she has the right to report it and get respectful maternal care. That's why we have this initiative, which is called the Suman. So this is basically to ensure respectful maternal care. Plus, to make sure that there is no denial to services. So she deserves the respect and dignity. That is Suman. And you have a grievance redressal mechanism. There's a number called 104 for grievance redressal mechanism. So this is actually a helpline which is integrated with Suman. So in case she has some issues, she goes to a hospital, she's not given the services, dial up 104 and you can register the complaint. That is your grievance redressal mechanism under Suman. Remember the logo very well. Moving on to the next one. Now we have two similar names. One is PMSMA. Another one is PMMBY. So which is a logo for SMA and ME. Both has a mother. Okay, both has a mother. One has a mother, pregnant mother alone. The other one has a mother and a child. So PMSMA is Pradhan Mantri Surakshit Matritva Abhiyan. So PMSMA stands for Pradhan Mantri Surakshit Matritva Abhiyan. Basically, government wants to provide a Surakshit or a safe maternity period for the mother. So that is for the mother. You see 9th of every month. What happens is, it is to ensure quality antenatal care and high-risk pregnancy detection for 9th of every month. So every month, 9th, at certain places, a camp is being conducted. Their doctors come, go to the rural area, they conduct camps, gynecologist is there, The radiologist is there. So the mothers, the antenatal, the pregnant ladies in that area, 9th of every month, they can come to that camp, attend the camp, they get all the treatment, diagnostics, everything free of cost. Plus, in case of high risk pregnancy, detection can be done because we are going with the gynecologist and the radiologist. So USC has been done. So all the high risk detection has to be done early so that we can prevent maternal mortality and the bad outcomes. So this is Pradhan Mantri Surakshit Matrutva Yojana. In the logo, you see a pregnant lady, a pregnant mother is there, or you see, you can write an S here, kind of an S. So that is PMSMA or Pradhan Mantri Surakshitra Matritva Yojana. Next one you have is PMMVY. That is Pradhan Mantri Matru Vantana Yojana. Full form is Pradhan Mantri Matru Vantana Yojana. You have a V here, Vandana. Or also there's a mother and a child. You have two V here. That's how you can remember the logo. So PMSMA, it's a pregnant mother. You can see an S also. PMMVY, you have a V here, two V's here, one child and one mother, both V kept like this. That's the logo for PMMVY. So Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana. What is this? It's not checkup. This is actually monetary benefit, or the mother gets money. So remember M and M, PMMVY, that MMM stands for, doesn't stand for that. This is how you can remember it. Mother, mom gets money. So PMMVY, mom gets money. How much money she gets? 5,000 rupees. Okay. So basically, during pregnancy, she needs more nutrition, right? So this is actually a scheme to support mothers so that they can avail more nutrition as well as to account for the loss of wages. Mother needs not just food, she needs rest also. So if the mother is not going for work, she has no pay, she has no wages, so she's forced to go to work. So government is providing 5,000 rupees. So that is kind of compensating for the loss of wages for her. So that's PMMVY. You give 5,000 rupees. Now there's a latest update in this. So PMMVY initially the 5,000 rupees was given only for the first child. The first child's delivery, mother gets 5,000 rupees, and that also it's not just given in one go. It is given as 3 installments at 3 particular points. I'll tell you about which are the points. But now, along with the first child, if the second child is a girl, if the second child is a girl, for that delivery, now the mother gets 6,000 rupees. So if I have a boy first, I get 5,000 rupees. If I'm pregnant again and second time I deliver a girl, I get 6,000 rupees. Second time it's a boy, I don't get it. Okay. That is the new update in the PMMVY. And how was this? The 5,000, what we told, they are given in 3 installments. First installment, she gets 1,000 rupees for early registration of pregnancy. So once she registers a pregnancy, she gets 1,000 rupees. Then 2,000 is got around 6th month of pregnancy if she had done at least one ANC checkup. Now she's left with 3,000, 2,000, right? It should be 5,000. This, the last 2,000 she gets once the childbirth is registered. She has to register the childbirth plus the child's first cycle of vaccination is completed. That is PCG, OPV, and the first DPT cycle, Penta 1. This much is completed, then she gets the next 2,000. So basically, you're giving the money in installments and also so that you're making sure that these things are being done. That is, she's going for ANC checkup, the mother is, early registration is being done, ANC checkup is being conducted, childbirth is being registered, and also the child's vaccination. So you give the money in installments. Total is 5,000. Update is, if it's a girl child, second baby, if it's a girl baby, for her, you give 6,000 rupees. Now, what do you mean by BEMOC and CEMOC? That's Basic Emergency Obstetric Care and Comprehensive Emergency Obstetric Care. So basic emergency obstetric care is, see, there are minimum 7 things, 7 functions that has to be there at a delivery point to provide basic emergency obstetric care. So if a mother is delivering, there are certain basic things that has to be there. In case she goes into an emergency, to manage that, some basic facilities should be there. That is listed under the name of basic emergency obstetric care. And comprehensive is a bit beyond that. So comprehensive emergency obstetric care is BEMOC, it is basic, plus if there is facility for cesarean section and blood transfusion, you call it as a comprehensive emergency obstetric care. So under basic emergency obstetric care, there are 7 points. And how are you going to remember it? I have a mnemonic for you. AI3 and RRR. AI, artificial intelligence, AI, talk of the town. So AI, but 3. You have to remember the 3 also. So AI 3 plus RRR. We have Rajamouli's famous film RRR, or most of you would have seen it. So remember AI3 and RRR, you will get all the points for PEMC. Just write it down. What is AI3? A, and I had 3. So I have 3 points to tell you because there is I3. A stands for assisted vaginal delivery. So in the facility where I'm conducting the delivery of the pregnant woman, there should be facilities for provision for assisted vaginal delivery. Okay, what is the I3? I3 says 3 injections basically. These 3 injections should be available. First one is your antibiotics, prevent sepsis. Second one is oxytocin, should be available. And third one is Mexsulf. So Mexsulfate, antibiotics and oxytocin are the 3 injections that has to be included to say that there is basic emergency obstetric care. Now come to RRR. RRR. First R is for resuscitation of the baby or the neonate. So neonatal resuscitation facility should be there. Next R is removal of placenta or manual removal of placenta should be available. Like that should be, facility should be there. Next one is removal of retained products. In case there is some retained products of placenta, the lady is going to bleed like anything and she'll end up in postpartum hemorrhage. You have to remove that retained products. So that portion should be there. Delivery is happening. Retained products are there. You don't know. You can't do anything. Nothing. Nobody knows. No skill. No equipments. Gone. So that should not happen. So for that we have the this basic emergency obstetric care guidelines. So basically you have AI3 and RRR, assisted vaginal delivery, then 3 injections, which are the oxytocin, antibiotics and Mexsulf. RRR for resuscitation of the neonatal first child, removal of placenta and removal of retained products. So this is AI3 and RRR. Along with that, if you have an OT and the blood transfusion facilities, you are upgrading to comprehensive emergency obstetric care. Moving on to the next question. So a region has a population of 6,000 people below 15 years, 12,000 between the age of 15 and 65, and 2,000 over 65. Calculate the dependency ratio of this population. What do you mean by dependency ratio? Dependency ratio is basically a ratio which says how many people are dependent on the working population. So who's the working population and who's a dependent? Who will be dependent? Guys, the baby, the children who are not going to work, they are dependent on the working population. They're dependent on their parents or uncles or aunts or whoever it is. And the grandparents, the old age people, they are also not in a state to go to work. So they are also dependents. So you have 2 extremes. That's one is population less than 15 years of age. The other one is population above 65. So these 2 extremes form the dependent population divided by the independent or the working population forms the denominator. That's population between 15 to 65. So formula is population less than 15 years of age plus population more than 65 divided by your population of 15 to 65. This gives this ratio is what you call as the dependency ratio. So in our question, we had 6,000 children, 2,000 elderly. So that's a dependent population divided by how many working population was given? That is 12,000. So you get an answer of 0.66. So this is the dependency ratio of that particular question. Okay, moving on. What is this question all about? Yeah, we have your NACO, National AIDS Control Program. So according to the National AIDS Control Program, which of the following is not a high risk group? Long distance truck drivers, men who have sex with men, injection drug users, and female sex workers. So AIDS Control Program, they have classified people into high risk group, general population is there, high risk group is there, and bridge population is there. So you have general population, which is the normal ANC, the normal people. Then you have certain high risk group, that is those who are at a higher risk of contracting AIDS. Then you have a bridge. Bridge population is somebody who can actually take this disease from the high risk group and give it to the general population. Okay, so you should know who all are coming under the general population, who all are coming under the high risk group and the bridge group. Rest everybody is in the general population. So here the answer is actually long distance truck drivers. They form a bridge population. Rest of these, that is transgender, the men who have sex with men, the gay, lesbian, that group. Injection drug users, that are IV drug abusers, and female sex workers. These are all the high risk group for HIV. So we say it as HRG. This is the high risk group. You have female sex workers. Then you have men with who has sex with men, and injection drug users. Then you have transgenders and hijra. These are all the high risk group. They are at a higher risk of getting HIV, or that is there is direct exposure. That's a high risk group. Next one is the bridge population. Bridge population can spread the infection from the high risk group to the general population, or you call them as the link, bridge, or the link group. Examples are long distance truck drivers, and you have one more group, that is migrant laborers. As per the program document, it is single male migrant SMM, we say, but you can remember it as the migrant laborers. And now we have also the clients of sex workers are also coming under the British population. Now this is the logo for NACO, National AIDS Control Program, established in, this is National AIDS Control Organization. Under this we have the NAC and National AIDS Control Program. And NACO was established in which year? 1992. It's a completely central government sponsored, 100% funding is from the central government sponsored scheme. Then now we have NACP 1, 2, 3, 4, and now we are at phase 5 from 2021 to 2026. Now, what is this 95, 95, 95 target? We had 85, 85, 85, 9, then it was upgraded to 90. Now it is 95, 95, 95. Says that 95% of the HIV people should know their status, that they are HIV positive. 95% should be on treatment, and 95% of those who are on treatment should be on viral suppression. That means the treatment is working. So this is the new targets, the 95, 95, 95 target for NACP now. Then we have what, how when do you start HIV treatment? Commonly asked question. So initially we used to start HIV treatment based on CD4 count. Now there's no guideline which says that CD4 count is the basis for treatment. No. This is now what we follow now is called as the test and treat policy. This says that you start the treatment irrespective of the CD4 count. Whatever is the CD4 count, you test somebody, that person is HIV positive, you start the antiretroviral therapy. No need to wait for the CD4 count to go down or anything. No, start test and directly treat. That's what you mean by the test and treat therapy. Then which is a preferred regimen we have, which is we have the TLD. TLD is the dolutegravir based regimen. That is what we use now. Now, and NACP 5, the major focus is on dual elimination of vertical transmission. What do you mean by vertical transmission? Mother to child transmission is called as vertical transmission. We were aiming for, at present, we are aiming for the dual elimination of vertical transmission, meaning two diseases. One is HIV, what is the other one? Syphilis. So HIV and syphilis both has to be stopped from coming from the mother to the child. So that is also a part of the program now. Now, treatment is, I told you, TLD. TLD is tenofovir, lamivudine, and dolutegravir. This is TLD. And for the mother, suppose a pregnant lady comes to you, test her for marker, you test for HIV, she comes out positive. What do you do? You have to start the lady on TLD then and there, test and treat. Pregnancy, whether it is teratogenic, no, it is not teratogenic or anything. You have to treat the mother. So start with TLD to the mother, and to the baby, for the newborn baby, as prophylaxis, you give syrup nevirapine. So nevirapine is given to the child once the baby is born, and mother gets TLD. One scenario. Second scenario, prick. What do you do in case of a get a needle prick or something? So what is the post-exposure prophylaxis? You get an exposure, you get a prick. What you do? Again, you have to start TLD. This is a treatment for post-exposure prophylaxis. So the same regimen. Ideally, it has to be started within 2 hours. You get a prick. You don't panic. You have to, if you can get the the serology of the patient, that's good. Of the person, that's good. But mostly, what happens is we don't know from which syringe we got the prick. Shouldn't happen, but when it happens, you won't be able to identify, or you won't be able to get the serology. So do the post-exposure prophylaxis ideally within 2 hours, or at least within 72 hours of exposure. You have to start the PEP. Okay, then only it is efficient. And duration is for 28 days. The person has to take a PEP. The regimen is the same: TLD, tenofovir, lamivudine, and dolutegravir. But WHO usually recommends TED regimen. That is, emtricitabine is given. But it's okay if you're in the questions. NACO says TLD, so you can go with TLD. Next question. Child with severe combined immunodeficiency is evaluated for routine immunization. All of the following vaccines are safe to administer except. So they are asking you which vaccine cannot be given in a child with immunodeficiency or immunocompromised child. So in immunodeficiency, you don't give which kind of vaccines? You don't give live vaccines. Live vaccines are more potent, so it's more potent, it's more effective. But in case of an immunocompromised patient, you don't give live vaccines. Whereas you don't give live vaccines, you don't give live vaccines in pregnancy. Usually, pregnancy is also a contraindication to give live vaccines. So pregnancy, immunocompromised, people on steroids, people on certain cancers, and all, you don't give the live vaccines. One live vaccine which is given in pregnancy, that's an MCQ, is yellow fever. See, yellow fever is not recommended in pregnancy or anything. No, it is a relative contraindication. All the other vaccines are absolute, all the other live vaccines are absolute contraindications for pregnancy, but yellow fever vaccines are relative contraindication. Somebody has to go out during a pregnancy time to an endemic area of yellow fever. You have to give the vaccine and send a yellow fever vaccine. Okay, that is a relative contraindication. Now here, which vaccine is contraindicated, or in other words, they are asking which among the following is a live vaccine. MMR is a live vaccine, rest are not live vaccines. So how do you remember live vaccines? So we have live vaccines, you have killed vaccines. Live vaccines are there, mainly live attenuated vaccines. Okay, then you have killed vaccines, and you have toxoid vaccines, and you have subunit vaccine, you have your conjugate, capsular vaccines, all those are. Now there's a mnemonic to remember live vaccines. You remember this live vaccines, so at least you will be able to write down which are the live vaccines. Such questions, you need to know the live vaccines name set first. That's mnemonic on screen. Be my torch. So where do you see this torch bearing ceremony? Which sports or which event you see sports? Not sports actually. Which event? It's in the Olympics. In Olympics, you see the torch bearing ceremony. And Olympics, how do you see Olympics? If you don't have the money to go then watch, you see it on TV live. You see Olympics live telecasted on television, right? So that's how you remember live. And this mnemonic, be my torch. Remember this Olympics torch bearing ceremony. Live vaccines mnemonic is be my torch. B stands for BCG. M, measles. All measles containing vaccines. It can be measles alone. MR, MMR. Okay, that's B, my. Y. Y stands for your yellow fever vaccine. Torch. T stands for typhoid live vaccine. O stands for OPV. Oral polio vaccine is live vaccine. IPV skill. Okay. And R is rota. Rota is again live. CH is for chickenpox or varicella. So these are all examples of live vaccines. Remember, be my torch, and you will be able to answer the names of the live vaccines. Moving on. Now you have a 2-year-old child brought to OPD with no history of prior immunization. What vaccines should be given at this visit? You have BCG, OPV, DPT, BCG, OPV, measles, vitamin A, BCG, penta, OPV, measles, OPV only. See, remember, unimmunized child or a partially immunized child is a common question. So comes to you, what all vaccines should be given? So you remember let's see the clues in this question. Child is 2-year-old, okay, without any history of immunization. So let's see the options. You see BCG in option A, option C, right? So BCG maximum you can give up to which year? 1 year. BCG is usually given at birth. In case you fail to give at birth, maximum you can give it up to 1 year. After 1 year, you cannot give BCG. So option A and option C you have ruled out. You cannot give BCG in option. Option A and option C are wrong because BCG cannot be given to a 2-year-old child. Now, you're left with DPT and what else is there? Measles plus OPV is there. Measles, OPT, DPT, vitamin A is there. So DPT is the determining factor to choose. See, DPT is given whether to give or not DPT. Okay, it's either penta or DPT. See, pentavalent vaccine is given only till 1 year of age. After 1 year, you don't give penta. Penta has DPT and hepatitis B and HIP. So if the child comes after 1 year, you have to give DPT alone. So option B is the correct answer here. So 2-year-old child, the child has already missed the 6 and 14 weeks pentavalent vaccine is gone. So now at least we can give DPT. It's not measles plus OPV only, no. The answer here is option B is the correct answer. OPV, DPT, measles, and vitamin A has to be given. So this is the table. Due to lack of time, I'm not explaining the table. You have to learn this. Till which age can the vaccine be given if missed? So whenever you have a missed vaccine, don't restart the whole schedule. Wherever the child has stopped, from that dose onwards, you can give. Okay. So BCG can be given till 1 year of age. Hepatitis B only up to 24 hours. OPV, 0 dose till 15 days of age. Then most of the vaccines you can give up to 5 years of age. Some are given only up to 1 year. Like penta and rota can be given till 1 year only. Plus your OPV, measles and all are given for, and OPV booster is also given 5 years of age. JE is the vaccine which can be given till 15 years of age, and DPT booster can be given till 7 years of age. So a child above age of 7, 8, 9 years comes your life is easy because you have to give only one vaccine, which is JE. I mean, I'm talking about the question. So if in a question, if you get a child of 9 years, unimmunized child, there's only one vaccine which can be given beyond 7 years. That is your JE. So remember this table. This table is very important. You can expect a question on unimmunized child or partially immunized child. Now, national immunization schedule, all the vaccines that has been administered in the national immunization schedule, the dose, everything is important. So you need to study the schedule. So what are the beneficiaries under the national immunization schedule? You have infants, children, and the pregnant woman. Pregnant woman, let's finish it off first. Pregnant lady, you have TD, tetanus and diphtheria. TD is given, TD1, TD2 is given at an interval of 4 weeks. If the mother has already had a complete dose of TD in the previous pregnancy, which was within last 3 years, she needs to get only TD booster. Now, that was about the pregnant woman. Coming to the children. In infants and children, we have to give vaccines at particular different age groups. So at birth, you give something. At 6, 10, 14 weeks, you give vaccines. Then at 9 to 11 months, you have to give. Next comes 16 to 23 months. Then 5 years, 10 years, and 16 years. So this is the schedule. Which all vaccines are given at which point of time? We'll study with the help of mnemonics. I'm going to start now. Be with me. So at birth, the vaccine which is given at birth, you can remember it as BOB, Bob. Can be baby on board is BOB, right? So at birth, you give B, O, and B, which is BCG, OPV, and the B last B is for hepatitis B. Okay, so B is for BCG, O is for OPV, and this B is for hepatitis B. So these are the 3 vaccines given at birth. Now coming to the 6, 10, and 14 weeks. So at birth, remember Bob, or you can remember Bob Marley, or you can remember as a baby on board. Now 6 weeks, you give rope plus IP. 10 weeks, you give rope. And 14 weeks, again, you give rope plus IP. What is rope? R for rota, O is for OPV, P is for penta. So again, rope is same in 6, 10, 14. So again, here also, rota, OPV, penta. Again, rope, rota, OPV, penta. So 6 and 14, you give rope. Then extra IP is given in 6 and 14. I is for IPV, P is for PCV. Okay. This P is for PCV, this PE is for penta. Similarly, here also you have IP, so IPV and PCV. So now we have studied Bob is for at birth, you give Bob, BCG, OPV, hepatitis B. At 6 weeks, you give rope plus IP. Rota, OPV, penta is rope. IP is IPV and PCV. 10 weeks, again rope. 14 weeks, rope plus IP again. Now, moving on to the next vaccine you give at 16 to 20. Sorry, this is given at 9 to 11 months. Then after that, you have vaccines at 16 to 23 months. 9 to 11 and 16 to 23. Remember MJ, Michael Jackson. M is for measles, MMR, or MR is usually given in the government setup. J is for J. Again, here also you have MR and J. Now, this IP, MJ plus IP in the 9 month and 16 months, it is MJ plus OD. IP is again the same. IP is always IPV and PCV. See, this is a new addition. Okay. 9 months IPV, fractional IPV given at 9 months is something relatively new. It is not there in your part, but it has been given and it is there in the document. So that's a new addition. That's an update. Can be asked. 9 months. Now we have IPV at 9 months also, along with your 6 and 10 week, 6 and 14 weeks. Now program has started giving IPV, fractionated IPV at 9 months also, along with MR and G. Now 16 to 20 months, MJ plus OD is OPV and D is your DPT booster. Now, then you have vaccines at 5 to 6 years. You give the DPT booster to 10 years, you give TD, and 16 years also you give TD. So all these are T vaccines. So from 5 years onwards, you have a T vaccine to be given. So that's a national immunization schedule for you. So this is again just a snapshot. Every vaccine, which age, which vaccine is given, what is the dose, where it is given, everything is important. Okay. Moving on to the next question. What is basic reproduction number, or R0? R0 is something that you have heard during your Nipah and COVID outbreaks in news everywhere. The R0 was discussed a lot, and it's a potential MCQ question. So basic reproduction number, or R0, is defined as number of secondary cases produced by a single case in a fully susceptible population, number of cases at equilibrium, attack rate, or prevalence of disease. See, basic reproduction number is the number of secondary cases produced by a single case. So, or in other simple words, it is the average number of people an infected person can spread the disease to, or an average number of people one infected person can infect in a susceptible population. So if the R naught is 2, that means in a susceptible population, if I have a disease, if I go there, I give the infection to 2 people. And each of these two can again spread the disease to 2 more. So that keeps on propagating. That's what is meaning of R naught. So it's a number of secondary cases produced by a single case in a fully susceptible population. So if R naught is 1, that means it's a stable state. If R naught is more than 1, that means your disease is going to spread. It's going to become an epidemic. Less than 1, disease is going to die out. So that is about R naught. Now, next question is, if the basic reproduction number or R naught is 5, what proportion of the population should be immunized to prevent an epidemic? Now, they're asking about the relationship between R naught and herd immunity. So, herd immunity is if, what is the concept of herd immunity? See, if in a population there are some people who cannot be vaccinated. If it's a live vaccine, for example, I told you immunocompromised, pregnant people, they cannot get a vaccine because it's a live vaccine. But if the majority of the population is protected, even these people are also indirectly protected because others are protected. So the infection doesn't come here. It breaks. The chain of transmission gets broken because the protected people kind of shields the unvaccinated people. That is herd immunity. And for this, we have a threshold called as the herd immunity threshold. So this threshold is 1 minus 1 by R naught will give you the herd immunity threshold. So if I apply this here, the question here you have 5% is given. So 1 minus 1 by 5. That will give me 1 minus 0.2. So that is 0.8 or 80% is the threshold. That means this particular population, at least 80% of the people should be vaccinated to prevent an epidemic. That is what you mean by the herd immunity threshold. Now moving on to the next question. So a 32-year-old male presents with decreased libido and fatigue. Laboratory evaluation reveals low serum testosterone. Dietary history shows poor intake of micronutrients. So which is a deficient mineral here? So you have decreased libido, fatigue, testosterone affected. The deficiency is going to be zinc. So zinc is the one that causes deficiency. The zinc micronutrient deficiency is the one that leads to all these symptoms. Okay. Moving on. All of the following are true about fluorosis except dental fluorosis occurs during tooth development. Optimal fluoride level in water is 0.5 to 0.8. Skeletal fluorosis occurs in less than 1 ppm. Instances are commonly affected. So here the wrong option is this one. Skeletal fluorosis occurs less than 1. No, for skeletal fluorosis to occur, you need the value should be around 3 to 5. The fluorosis level. See, fluorine, this is the image of fluorosis. So fluorine is a micronutrient, but fluorine in excess can damage your enamel, can damage your bones and all, and it leads to fluorosis. And what are the levels you have? So if your fluorine level in water is more than 1.5 mg per liter, you get mottling of enamel, which is called as your dental fluorosis. That's what I've shown here. If the level is somewhere between 3 and 6, the person ends up with skeletal fluorosis, where the fluorine gets deposited in the joints and all, leading to joint pain, stiffness, osteosclerosis. And if it's more than 10, the person ends up with skeletal deformities and called as crippling fluorosis. So these levels are important. Moving on to the next question. Now, while assessing normality of a data set, a researcher considers several statistical and graphical methods. Which of the following is not a valid method to test normality? You have Probable, histogram, box and Wilson, and Manson test. See, Manson test is not a method to test normality. Probable is a test to check normality, and your histogram and box and whisker also helps to, it gives normality, but the Manson test does not show you normality. What do you see here? This is a this is your box and whisker. You see a box, this is a box, and you see a whisker. So this plot, this is called as a box and whisker plot. It actually is a way of representing data. You have a data set, which you want to, show it diagrammatically. You make use of the box and whisker. So this is a parts of a box and whisker. In the box is there, and you have a whisker here. So it shows the ends of the whisker. It shows the lower extreme data value and the upper extreme. And the 50% is the 50th percentile is the median. Then here you have a 25th lower quartile, and upper quartile is again 75 percentile. So these things you get from a box and whisker plot. Moving on to the next question. So a community medicine researcher analyzes systematic blood systolic BP values and finds out they are following a normal distribution. So we are talking about a normal distribution curve. He wants to estimate the proportion of individuals whose values lie between the median and one standard deviation. What is the expected proportion? So you're dealing with the data which is normally distributed. So you have to remember the logics of the normal distribution, the Gaussian distribution, the bell-shaped curve where the median, mode, everything is the same. And the question is, what is the how many percentage of the individuals lie between your median and one standard deviation? So for that, you need to know this particular normal distribution curve. So you have a normal distribution curve where the central mean, median, and mode all are the same. And this is one standard deviation. Okay, this much. But 68% of the proportion lies within one standard deviation in a normal distribution curve. 95% lies within two standard deviation. 99.7 lies between three. So 68, 95, and 99.7. What they've asked you is this. How much percentage lies between the center and 1 plus 1 ST? So that is basically half of your 68, that is 34% will be the correct answer, 0.34. So this is the one that has been asked. But to understand that has been asked, they have asked you, what is the value, how many values lie between median and one standard deviation? And the clue is, this is a normal distribution. So in a normal distribution, mean, median, mode, everything is the same. So when they ask median plus one standard deviation, they are just asking what's the mean plus or minus plus one standard deviation. So mean plus and minus one standard deviation is 68%. So mean plus one standard deviation will be half of that, which is 34%. So here the answer is 34. Moving on to the next question. So this is about rabies. So 30-year-old man, long-term steroids present with dog bite causing superficial abrasions. That is category 2. They've already given you. Dogs and dogs vaccinated. What is the most appropriate management? See, it's a category 2 wound. A man is coming. Dog is vaccinated. That's okay. Irrespective of the vaccination status of the dog, somebody comes with the dog bite, you give the rabies vaccine. And if needed, you give the immunoglobulin also. Because we cannot rely on the dog vaccination status alone. Because we are dealing with a very fatal disease which has no cure at all. Patient gets rabies, patient dies. So always better go for the vaccine. So here they've given category 2 wounds. So for category 1, category 2, category 3. Category 1, what do you give? Reassure the patient, nothing else. Category 2 wound, just a vaccine. Category 3, vaccine and immunoglobulin. So here it is wound care plus anti-rabies vaccine is the correct answer here. Now, how do you give the anti-rabies vaccine? So we are talking about post-exposure prophylaxis. The patient had the dog bite and then coming to his post-exposure prophylaxis. You have two regimens. You have SN regimen and the modified Thai Red Cross regimen. So SN, 5 words, 5 alphabets, ESSEN. Thai has 4 alphabets, THAI. So Thai regimen is the one which we follow in the government setup, modified Thai Red Cross regimen. So here we give rabies vaccine is given intradermally. How much? 0.1 ml intradermally on 4 days. Which are the days? 0, 3, 7, and 28. So Thai, 4 letters. So 4 days, 0, 3, 7, 28. How much do you give? 0.1 intradermally. SN has 5 letters. So you have to give 5 doses. So this is, you give 0.5 ml intramuscularly on 5 days. 0, 3, 7, 14 and 28. The other one did not have a 14. Here you are also giving the vaccine on the 14th day. So that is post-exposure prophylaxis, Thai and SN, 4 and 5. Now we have 2 more things. One is your pre-exposure prophylaxis and pre-exposure prophylaxis. Re-exposure prophylaxis is repeated exposure. You got a dog bite, you had taken the vaccine, everything. Now again you get one more dog bite. Now what do you do? So if the second dog bite is within 3 months of the previous vaccination completion, you don't have to do anything, you're protected. If it's beyond 3 months, you have to take 2 doses. Okay. You give the vaccine on day 0 and 3. And now we have a pre-exposure prophylaxis. No dog bite, nothing. But before getting a dog bite, we are taking a pre-exposure prophylaxis. Especially the veterinary doctors, they do take this. or if you're traveling to a rabies endemic area or some trekking and all you're going, if you are at a risk of getting it over, better to take the pre-exposure. For pre, you give it on 3 days. It is 0, 7, and either 21 or 28. So how do you remember this? Pre has RE, 2 letters. So you give on 0 and 3. Pre has 3 letters, 0, 7, 28. So it's on 3 days. That's how you remember the rabies vaccine. So if it's a category 2 wound, just the vaccine is okay. Category 3 wound, you have to go for the immunoglobulin also. Okay, now moving on with the next question. An X-ray of a 60-year-old shipyard worker shows bilateral calcified pleural plaques and interstitial fibrosis, predominantly in the lower lobe of the lungs. This is highly suggestive of which disease? Silicosis, asbestosis, bistosis, cirrhosis. Which one? Let's see for the clues in the question. Shipyard worker is exposed to which mineral? Shipyard worker is exposed to asbestos, right? That is one clue. Second clue is you have bilateral calcified pleural plaques in the lungs, predominant in the lower lobe of the lungs. Again, another pointer for asbestosis. So here you're dealing with the case of asbestosis, where in asbestos you get the lower part of the lung fields are affected, and shipyard worker is a occupational exposure risk. So option B is the correct answer here. Why not others? Silicosis, usually in silicosis, what do you get? You get a upper lobe fibrosis in silicosis, not the lower lobe fibrosis. What is bisonosis? Bisonosis is due to cotton dust exposure. And what is bagasosis? Bagasosis is sugarcane. So bagasosis is sugarcane dust exposure. Bisonosis is cotton dust exposure. Cirrhosis is iron. Okay. So here our question we are asking about asbestosis. So what is this? What you see here is called as the asbestos bodies. So in case of an asbestosis patient, when you do a sputum AFP, you get something called as something like this. These are called as the ferruginous bodies or asbestos bodies. These are actually asbestos fibers. They are getting coated with iron and protein in the body. And when you do the sputum AFP, you can see the bands. These are the asbestos fibers coated with iron. So this is called as asbestos bodies. Drumbell, or what you can say, it's a drumstick kind of shaped rods. Classical finding in asbestosis. Now, one thing in occupational health, what are the different pneumoconiosis you know? We have silicosis, asbestosis, coal workers, pneumoconiosis, anthracosis, bisonosis, bagasosis, farmers' lung features are all important. So, silicosis is mainly affecting the upper lobes, and you get Excel's classifications, calcification, and silicosis patients are more prone to develop TB also. So, there is tuberosilicosis also. Asbestosis we just discussed. Then you have anthracosis, also called as black lung. Bisonosis is your cotton fiber. Bagasosis is sugarcane industry. Then you have, cirrhosis also. Then berylliosis is also there. Berylliosis is due to beryllium exposure, especially in aerospace and electronic industries. You get that, and they have a sarcoid-like picture. You get a non-caseating granulome and all that. So that was about the occupational pneumoconiosis. What is this? This is something recent. Okay, we have a new portal called as the e-Shram portal. See, we have ESI Act and many other things for the employees, right? For the employment, employer health, so the employee health benefits. We have ESI benefits and all that. But these are all for organized sectors. But we have a huge workload of gig workers nowadays, right? Gig workers who are working on, online platforms like your people who bring in food, Swiggy, Zomato, who bring your, deliveries, Amazon delivery, the Flipkart delivery boy. Everybody comes under the gig worker. So this is actually a unorganized sector because they don't have a boss per se, right? That's an unorganized sector and they are not getting any benefits or they don't have an organization per se. So for that, there is something called as a e-Shram portal by the Government of India, Ministry of Health, sorry, not Ministry of Health, Labor and Employment Ministry, Ministry of Labor has started the e-Shram portal. This is for a national-wide database for gig workers or unorganized workers by Ministry of Labor and Employment. And what they get is, see, anybody who's age 16 to 59 years working in this gig industry, they can register and because they're not covered under any ESIC or anything. What's the benefit of registering under e-Shram is, in case of any accidents, they get an accidental insurance coverage. of up to 2 lakh rupees. Okay. This is actually provided under the Pradhan Mantri Suraksha Bima Yojana. But for that, they have to be registered under the e-Shram. So basically, remember, e-Shram portal is for the unorganized workers in our country. And that's a new update, so you can expect questions from that. Next question. Which is the best indicator to evaluate obstetric and neonatal care given at around the time of birth? IMR, perinatal, under 5 and stillbirth rate. See, we are talking about around the time of birth. The best indicator is perinatal mortality rate. What do you mean by perinatal mortality rate? PMR. This is also called as the yardstick of obstetric care. Perinatal mortality rate is got by the stillbirths plus early neonatal deaths per 1,000 live births or into 1,000. So stillbirth is a fetal death occurring after 28 weeks of gestation is considered as a stillbirth. That plus early neonatal death. Who's an early neonate? A baby who's only up to 1 week of age. That is 7 days old neonate. Up to that is also taken as early neonatal death. That per 1,000 live births is your perinatal, mortality rate. And it is a very sensitive indicator of maternal and newborn health services, both combined together, because it gives you the health outcome of the mother as well as the child. Only if the perinatal period is safe, you have a lesser mortality in this perinatal period. Okay, now these are all different mortality. What do you mean by infant mortality, neonatal mortality, under 5 mortality, maternal mortality ratio rate? Everything is important. Due to lack of time, and since this is a revision class, I'm not going into each one. You should know what each indicator is, what is the formula, and also the values. See, PSM values keep on getting updated, and the updated values I've given here. Presently, these are all taken from the SRS, Sample Registration System report. Latest reports have come. This is Northern Union textbook. Please update and study these values. So IMR at present is 25 per 1,000 live births. Your neonatal mortality has become 19. Under 5 is 31. MMR is 80, 88. MMR, I think potentially they can ask you MMR and IMR. MMR is 88 per 1 lakh live births. Everywhere we are talking about per 1,000 live births. But MMR, when I say R, it is ratio. Maternal mortality ratio is per 1 lakh live births. So please remember all these values. Okay. Just showing you all the values. So IMR 25, at least if it's difficult to remember everything, at least remember that IMR is 25 and your MMR is 88. Okay. Moving on to the next question. So in a population to prevent coronary artery disease, changing harmful lifestyles by education is referred to as. So what kind of prevention are they talking about? We are having a education, changing lifestyle. This is basically primary prevention. What are the levels of prevention? Primordial, primary, secondary, tertiary. We'll write each one. So you have primordial prevention. Basically, you're trying to prevent the risk factor itself. Even before the occurrence of risk factor, you go to a population, you go to a group and do some prevention. That is primordial prevention. Primary prevention is preventing what? Preventing the disease occurrence. So somebody has a risk factor, you counsel them then and there. If they stop their risk factor, they can be saved from the disease. That is primary. Secondary prevention is diseases that already occurred, but you have to find it, pick it up early and start prompt treatment. Early diagnosis and treatment comes under secondary prevention. And finally, you have tertiary prevention. That is preventing the complications. Now you have something called as quaternary prevention also. This is to prevent over medicalization, giving over medicines and unnecessary interventions. Simply getting the patient, unnecessary CT scan, MRI, giving so much of medicines, all this has to be prevented. That comes under the quaternary prevention. That's a new entity. Same thing. You have levels of prevention and modes of intervention. Primary prevention, which are the modes? Health promotion, specific protection. Secondary prevention, early diagnosis and treatment. Tertiary prevention, you have disability limitation and rehabilitation. So these are the different levels of prevention and the modes of intervention. Moving on to the next question. So since lack of time, I have to skip some of the questions here. Let's see. Okay. You have a primary health program focuses on reducing childhood morbidity and mortality by targeting major contributors such as pneumonia, diarrhea, malaria, malnutrition through an integrated approach at community level. Which of the following is not primarily addressed under this strategy? So basically, they're asking about a health program which is focusing on preventing the childhood morbidity and mortality. So we are talking about IMNCI. What is IMNCI? Integrated Management of Neonatal and Childhood Illnesses. And under this, we have major contributors of childhood morbidity and mortality, including pneumonia, your diarrhea, malnutrition, otitis media, all these things are there, except the IMNCI does not include neonatal tetanus. Okay, that's the answer here. So this is the logo of IMNCI in pink, mother and child. So IMNCI is actually adapted from IMCA. So we have IMCI and IMNCI. IMCA is the WHO or the globally recommended one. So once WHO came up with IMCI, WHO told, okay, every country, now they can adapt or they can modify according to their country's need and implement it. So when it came to India, we made it as IMNCI. India has N in the middle. Similarly, the Indian version also has an N in the middle, but that N is standing for neonate. So WHO was concentrating on the child in integrated management of childhood illnesses, but when it came to India, since we are having a big amount of neonatal mortality also, we have included the N part, which made it integrated management of neonatal and childhood illness. Basically, it is a kind of a guideline which tells what to do. When a patient comes to you, it has color coding also. So first thing is check for danger signs, then you have to assess the main symptoms and also assess the nutrition, immunization, feeding problems, everything. And then according to the symptom, for each disease, there are different guidelines and you can classify the patient into green, that is child who can be managed at home, or a yellow category, that is treatment should be given at the OPD, or somebody who needs urgent referral put under the pink category. So the color coding are pink, yellow, and green. Green, send home. Yellow, treat at OPD level. Red needs, red not red, sorry, it is pink. Pink needs urgent referral. So each disease, we have different categories, and basically based on that, you have to manage the patient at a primary health center level. That is the IMNCA talking about. Next question is, so a health worker uses a growth chart during an under 5 clinic to monitor a child's nutritional status. So growth chart is a question here. Which of the following statements regarding interpretation of the chart is incorrect? So it can be used as a tool for counseling and educating caregivers. Of course, yes, that's one of the main use. Trend of plotted points over time is more important than a single measurement. Yes, in growth chart, what you do is you plot the child's growth at weight at different points. And more than the single points, the trend, whether the child is improving in weight or the weight is declining, is he going into malnutrition, that is more important than your single point. So it shows the trend. It is a tool for counseling the mother and the caregiver. The band between upper reference line represents the zone of normal growth. That's also true. Exact position of point is more important. No, that is wrong. The exact position of point is not important. It is important, but more important is the trend. Okay, that's the answer here. So this is a growth chart. You see, you have different color codings here, and different points are there. So based on the age and the weight, or it can be for height. Weight for height we have, for weight we have, for height we have, different growth charts are there. Blue is for the boy and red growth charts are for the girl. So here you can plot each points, and then you can see whether the weight is increasing or it's falling. So you can actually pick up a child who is falling into underweight or malnutrition faster. Now, growth chart is based on, the idea of growth chart is based on something called as a MGRS study. What is this? Multicentric growth reference study. That is your MGRS study. So this was basically, in children who were raised in optimal conditions in 6 countries. Based on their data, only these growth charts where the idea was developed. And which are the 6 countries which were part of the study? I have a mnemonic for you. Big Sun. Big Sun. Okay, big. B is for Brazil. I is India. G is Ghana. S is States or United States of America, USA. O is for Oman and N is Norway. So these are the 6 countries which was part of this MGR study, and this study is the basis for the growth chart. That is again a important asked question, one-liner. What is this image-based MCQ. What is this? This is a tool which helps in the community-based assessment of malnutrition. It picks up children. It is measuring. What is he measuring? He is measuring the mid-upper arm circumference. This is called as Shakir's tape. Shakir's tape is a favorite MCQ. Can be an image-based question, and based on the color coding, if the child is having more than 13.5 centimeter, color code is green. He is fine. 12.5 to 13.5 yellow, and less than 12.5 child is malnourished, severe malnutrition, and the color code becomes yellow, red. Okay, next question. A 2-year-old child presents with visible severe wasting, poor appetite, no edema, weight for height is less than -3. What is the most appropriate? What is the diagnosis first? Tell me the diagnosis, then we'll go to management. See, diagnosis is SAM, severe acute malnutrition. So what are the 3 conditions to say that a child is having SAM? You don't need all 3. Even if one is present, you say the child is having severe acute malnutrition. You have 3, 11.5 and edema rule. This is the rule for SAM. First is weight for height. If the weight for height of a child is less than -3 standard deviation, you say the child is having severe acute malnutrition. Or, it's not and, it is or. Or, if the mid-upper arm circumference of the child is less than 11.5, child is severe acute malnourished child. Third one, if there is bilateral pitting, pedal edema, then also you say the child is a SAM child, severe acute malnutrition child. So, if any one of this is positive, then you say the child is a SAM child. And in case of a SAM child, in a severe acute malnourished child, you treat the child at nutritional rehabilitation centers, usually, which are called as NRCs or nutritional rehabilitation centers. And there, once a child goes, first thing is to stabilize. The severe acute malnourished child will have so many issues. So first thing is you correct the electrolyte, you correct the hyponatremia, you correct the hypothermia, everything. So that's the first thing. Then once the child is stabilized, now you have to go for the recovery and the rehabilitation and the maintenance growth. So starting, you have to start with F75 diet. So here the answer is appropriate initial management is F75. So we have 2 types of diet, F75 and F100 is there. 75 is 75 kilocalories, 100 is 100 kilocalories. So in a SAM child, during the stabilization phase, you give F75 diet. Once the child improves, when the appetite returns, the basic electrolyte, everything is normal, then you change into F100 diet. So this is F75 and F100 diet. We can prepare it. And it is energy 75 kilocalorie in F75 and 100 in F100. So initial management, you give F75. After stabilization, after the appetite returns, you give the F100. Now, what are the features of, now we talked about SAM. Just like SAM, we have protein energy malnutrition. We have marasmus as well as kwashiorkor, right? You have a marasmus baby here. You have a kwashiorkor baby here. Both are protein energy malnutrition conditions. So some of the important features of marasmus and kwashiorkor we'll remember with the mnemonics. For marasmus, you remember skin and bone. The child, marasmic child, looks like skin and bones. He's just skin and bones. You see the image here. Just a bony appearance with just a skin, no muscle, nothing. And this is what you call as the baggy pant appearance. Because of loss of muscle mass, child looks all emaciated like an old man facies and baggy pant appearance. Whereas a kwashiorkor baby looks puffy. It's actually because of the edema. The child is not fat or anything. Child is edematous. So that moon facies edema and the skin and all has flaky pain dermatosis. Hair you get your flag sign, everything. That's a kwashiorkor baby. Kwashiorkor baby is actually more severe, okay? And the child has no appetite whatsoever. So meals fail is the mnemonic for kwashiorkor and skin and bone for marasmus. We'll just write down skin and bone. What is each? I'm writing SKIN, skin and bone. That is for marasmus. S stands for severe wasting. K is kid-like or old man facies. I is infections. There is more chance of infections in marasmus baby. N is no edema. That is the major differentiating point from kwashiorkor. Marasmus baby will not have edema. Kwashiorkor baby has edema. Okay. And this A stands for appetite present. N is nutritional deficiencies. P is developmental retardation will be there for the child. Bone. B is bones are prominent in the child. O is old man appearance. N is no subcutaneous fat. Child is all skin and bones. E is emaciated appearance. This is for marasmus. And for kwashiorkor, you can remember it as meals fail. MEALS. Child has no appetite. So you can remember that also means fail. M is moon phase. E is edema. Edema is a hallmark feature of Kwashiorkor. A is for anemia. L is liver, fatty liver, hepatomegaly, many liver kind of changes will be there. S is skin changes. You have flaky pain, dermatosis. And next fail. F is for flaxine. Where you get flaxine in the hair. A is anorexia and apathy. I is again infections will be here also. L is muscle wasting or loss of muscle. And last L, one more L is there, that is low albumin. See the albumin, the liver is damaged, the albumin functioning is albumin will be low. That leads to edema in the child. So that's about the Kwashiorkor baby. We'll take up one more question and then we'll end up this discussion for today. So you have an outbreak of epidemic dropsy occurring in a community. So the following adulterants is most likely responsible. So epidemic dropsy, we are talking about food adulterant and diseases associated. So you see dropsy. You see the O here. So epidemic dropsy, you see the O, you remember oil. Okay, dropsy has an O here. Epidemic dropsy is basically because of the adulteration of mustard oil with argemone oil. Okay, you see this. This is how mustard seeds look. And the next picture you see there's an argemone seeds. They look similar. So what people do is they mix this argemone seeds along with mustard seeds and sell it for monetary benefits. So when the oil, once you make it into oil, along with the mustard oil, you are actually adulterating. It is being adulterated with argemone oil. And if you consume argemone oil in excess amounts, you end up with, edematous issues like you get bilateral pitting pedal edema, which is the main feature. Sometimes it can the water retention, it can lead to cardiac failure, even cardiac failure, glaucoma. So it's actually a very bad condition. So epidemic dropsy, causative agent is adulteration of your mustard oil with argemone oil. This is argemone mexicana. The plant is this, and the toxin that causes all this, the toxin is sanguinarine. That is the name of the toxin. So we have a, what is this? Another most commonly asked adulterant and the disease associated. You have a 1-stick stage, you have a 2-stick stage, you have a crawler stage associated with your kesari dal. This is, we're talking about neurolathyrism. Neurolathyrism is caused by prolonged consumption of kesari dal. So it is actually a neurodegenerative kind of disorder where initially the patient will be walking with 1 stick. Later on, he'll become more weak, eat 2 sticks, and later on ends up in crawling stage and bedridden patient. Okay. So neuroarthritism is because of overconsumption of kesari dal, and the toxin is BOA, BOA, beta oxalyl aminoalin is a toxin responsible for neurolathyrism. And vitamin C is kind of protective. Now this is a summary table of all the food toxins and the the causative agent and the condition, the source of the adulterant, the toxin, and the important points. This is a very high yielding table, very important table. Please learn this table because you can get questions, and if you learn this, don't miss that question. Okay, you learn this table and just score the mark. So lathyrism is causative agent. I told you kesari dal. Scientific name is Lathyrus toxin BOA. BOA. Okay. Patient comes with spastic paraplegia, scissoring gait is an important point, and UMN lesion. You have aflatoxin causing aflatoxicosis. Causative agent is your Aspergillus flavus, that the fungi is causing it. Toxin is aflatoxin. It is hepatotoxic. It can even lead to hepatocellular carcinoma. Ergotism, because of ergota alkaloid, clavus purpurea. Patient comes with gangrene, black color, discoloration, see gangrenous, and convulsions also can occur. Then you have epidemic dropsy, we just discussed. Mustard oil adulteration, toxin is sanguinarine. Patient comes with all kind of edema, cardiac failure, and glaucoma. So this is about the food toxins. So with that, we are ending up this discussion on the INI-CET questions. The next rest of the questions we'll be dealing in the next part with tomorrow's live. So thank you for listening and good night.